Chapter 1063, Double Strike. At last, the Saiyan energy cannon arrived. Though it had been fired before the Ego Star's collapse, its power remained undiminished, an enraged dragon of pure energy hurtling toward the towering Ego with unstoppable force. At its heart swirled a core of condensed, living energy that seemed almost sentient, roaring in fury as it drove straight for its target. Its radiance outshone 1,000 suns, illuminating the entire galaxy and banishing every shadow in its path. But Ego did not flinch. He hefted his colossal warhammer, and with it came a subtle warping of space itself, as if even the fabric of reality quivered before his might. The hammer's weight was enough to shake the galaxy. Its swing echoed like the very heartbeat of the universe. When that meteor-like column of light slammed into the warhammer, creation itself seemed to pause in awe of the collision. The stars themselves seemed to pause, their light solidifying as all life held its breath, waiting for the outcome of this titanic clash. In that suspended instant, time lost all meaning. Only raw power remained, colliding, merging, and annihilating. Then came the thunderous roar, as if the universe had uttered its first cry, bang! Where the enormous purple warhammer met the searing pillar of light, a blinding shower of sparks erupted. These sparks looked like fragments of shattered stars, scattering across the void and briefly illuminating its endless depths. From the point of impact, energy rippled outward in visible concentric waves, each crest trembling distant suns and subtly warping the galaxy's architecture. It was as though the collision had set the cosmos itself trembling. Within this roiling sea of power, where matter and energy were ruthlessly rent and reassembled, where even space and time writhed under the strain, one presence remained unmoved. Like an ancient mountain in the heart of a storm, the colossal Ego stood firm, impervious to the maelstrom of creation and destruction raging all around. It was as though Ethan himself proclaimed to the cosmos that he was invincible. Even the vastness of deep space recoiled at the force he unleashed. A colossal repulsive wave radiated from him in every direction, clashing with the surrounding pressures and whipping the universe into a storm of energy turbulence, a truly awe-inspiring sight. This power was so overwhelming that the universe itself seemed to quake, summoning all its strength to contain the onslaught. Ultron stood before the towering figure in stunned silence. He had never encountered a being of such magnitude. Even without visible energy surges, Ethan's mere presence suggested that a single gesture could annihilate a planet. Ethan's divine senses shimmered with raw potential. Every subtle shift in his expression radiated boundless power. Then, without warning, he unleashed a brilliant, destructive beam of purple light. This was unlike any energy cannon Ultron had ever seen. It was purer and more condensed, as though the very essence of creation had been funneled into a single, pulsating shaft of energy. Ethan unleashed a brilliant beam of light that cleaved through the void, tracing an elegant arc. Its trajectory was more than a play of luminescence and shadow. It twisted time and space, compressing the very essence of the universe into a single, fleeting display. With a sudden surge of speed, the beam hurtled toward Ultron, its violet core glowing with unfathomable power. Within that purple shaft of energy, colors shifted in subtle gradations, each hue an echo of eternity, collapsing into a fraction of a second, offering any onlooker a dizzying glimpse of cosmic birth and destruction in one heartbeat. Behind it raged a torrent of elemental force so potent it threatened to annihilate everything in its path. Reality itself bent and buckled, space warped, fractured, and folded into chaos. Across the fleet, observers felt dread and despair wash over them as the attack seemed to swallow the stars themselves. Ultron stood his ground, eyes locked on the oncoming wave of RGY. In the face of such a cataclysmic assault, he realized there would be no corner of space left untouched, and no time at all to escape. Because the god Ego's attack outpaced even light, warping the very fabric of space, it materialized before the fleet the instant it was fired. Ethan barely had a heartbeat to react. His face tightened in a grimace, but he kept his composure and barked his order. The Saiyans must gather every ounce of their power. Boom! A deafening roar tore through the void as their collective energy burst forth like a volcanic eruption. It slammed into Ego's towering column of violet light. At point-blank range, two forces, each capable of obliterating a planet, collided, unleashing a shockwave that rippled across the entire fleet. Thousands of ships shuddered on their hinges. Some were torn to shreds by the sheer force of the blast. "Fall back," Ethan commanded. He knew now that he had gravely underestimated the god ego. This was a foe beyond his current strength. But it wouldn't be the end of the story. Down on their hidden base, the next generation of Saiyan warriors was already rolling off the assembly lines. Before long, Ethan would marshal thousands more and return to settle the score with Ego once and for all. God Ego's eyes flared with frustration. He'd meant to reshape the very fabric of space to trap Ultron once and for all. But in one careless instant, his spell had misfired, and Ultron had slipped through the cracks. Now, the only thing on his mind was his son, Peter Quill, Star-Lord. As long as that unpredictable half-human remained free, any number of foes, Ultron's legions or the encroaching Saiyan horde, could spill through the breach and wreak havoc across the cosmos. In his view, removing Peter's latent power was the keystone. Everything else could wait. He had just completed the final adjustments to his celestial body, a form of living starlight forged to divine perfection, when a searing bolt of energy streaked through the void and slammed into the space he'd just vacated. Without a word, God Ego warped the position of his transformed star self, letting the blast ricochet harmlessly into the dark expanse. He watched it vanish, its destination unknown, potentially crushing some distant world. For a god, it was a chilling confirmation. The force behind that shot was beyond even his reckoning. Had the beam struck his true form, its power would have torn him to atoms. God Ego, he spun toward the voice. A slender figure floated amid the glittering constellations, a woman with pale skin and an ice-blonde bob that shimmered like starlight. Her posture was relaxed, but her gaze was unflinching. "Who are you?" Ego demanded, his voice echoing across the starfields. "Designation, Galactic Empire Model 18, she replied coolly. Android 18. The name carried weight and danger. God Ego's lips curved into a thin smile. This confrontation, it seemed, was just beginning. Chapter 64. Android number 18. Galactic Empire? Ethan's voice echoed through the silent expanse of space, laced with incredulity and a hint of scorn. As one of the few beings in the universe bold enough to claim godhood, he was intimately familiar with its grand design. In recent years, the Galactic Empire had thundered across the galaxy like a colossus, its technological prowess and military might leaving countless star systems in awe. It had even dared to challenge the three ancient empires, the Shi'ar, the Kree, and the Skrull, and to all accounts had met them on equal footing. Rumor held that neither the Shi'ar nor the Kree had ever gained the upper hand. Instead, both had tasted defeat time and again. More than just cutting-edge technology, the Empire boasted an elite army of warriors, fleets of advanced warships, and a secretive faction said to bend the very laws of the cosmos. And yet, despite every warning, Ethan remained utterly unperturbed. Ego regarded the splendor of the Shi'ar Empire and the valor of the Kree as nothing more than precursors to the inevitable rise of the Galactic Empire. And he, Ego, existed on a plane far above them all. To him, these were distant skirmishes, irrelevant to a god who drifted through the cosmos, sustained by the light of a million stars. A solitary presence adrift in the universe, he answered to no master and felt no urge to meddle in the petty struggles of mortals. His living world, a sentient planet, possessed the terrifying power to swallow suns and transmute their energy. It was this ability that kept his name perpetually at the top of every galaxy's most wanted list, yet no force had ever truly dared to defy him. Those who tried had simply become part of his immense being. Now, standing before him, was No. 18, the Galactic Empire's elite enforcer. The call sign alone hinted at bureaucracy, not combat prowess, but the aura radiating from her told a different story. A potent, almost living surge of energy pulsed outward, so intense that Ego's ancient consciousness could not help but bristle at the challenge. For the first time in countless millennia, he frowned. This opponent would not be as effortless to dispatch as the last. "I haven't done anything to the Galactic Empire, have I?" Ethan's voice carried a sharp edge. He bristled at being blamed out of the blue, especially by an authority he regarded with open contempt. Yet the next words from Agent 18 forced him to pause. "No, Ethan," Agent 18 replied evenly. You entered Imperial space without authorization, consumed 10 inhabited worlds, stripped a dozen resource-rich planets bare, and annihilated the Empire's coordinate stations at will. The total death toll, Imperial citizens alone, stands at approximately 9.56 trillion. And I've been dispatched to stop you. Ethan arched an eyebrow. So I've been trespassing on Imperial territory? His tone dripped with disbelief and disdain. Agent 18's expression remained calm, but a flicker of something, regret, uncertainty, crossed his eyes before he masked it once more. Agent 18 lifted her hand deliberately, and a veil of pale light shimmered into being on her palm. Within it unfolded a three-dimensional record of Ego's atrocities. The exact dates and star systems of his first assault, the silent breach of the Galactic Empire's defensive grid, the systematic consumption of entire worlds, and the catastrophic loss of life and ecological collapse that followed. Every image was razor-sharp, every statistic indisputable. Ego's features darkened. He had never truly doubted that his actions carried consequences, but he'd grown accustomed to solitude and absolute freedom, answering to no one but himself. He'd never paused to consider the wreckage he left in his wake, nor had he shown the slightest deference to any power, least of all the distant might of the Empire. Agent 18's voice cut through the charged air. Those worlds you devoured were nothing more than cosmic dust. What does their brief existence matter against the immensity of the universe? Ego's eyes flared. He drew himself up, every inch the defiant conqueror. Humph, you dare lecture me, a sovereign being beyond your puny empire's reach? He would not bow. Do you really think you can stop me by sheer force? Ego's voice dripped with contempt as a blinding aura flared around him, his unmistakable signal that he was ready to strike. But Number 18 didn't waver. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Ego, you flagrantly violated the statutes of the Galactic Empire and wrought irreparable harm. The 95,600,000,000,000 lives you've extinguished were each an integral part of the cosmos. Their destruction poses a grave threat to universal order. Of course, Number 18's reprimand sprang not from some lofty sense of justice or a profound respect for life. Among the Empire's high command, her reputation wasn't built on courage or combat prowess, but on an insatiable curiosity and an unending thirst to explore the unknown. Bored to distraction by routine assignments that even Ethan, the Empire's decorated champion, seldom deigned to share with her, she leapt at any whisper of something extraordinary. So when rumors surfaced of a living planet named Ego, a world capable of growth, thought, and self-awareness, her interest flared into obsession. In Number 18's eyes, a conscious planet was nothing short of a cosmic miracle, and she intended to see it with her own eyes. She decided to come in person, partly out of curiosity, partly to spare the Galactic Empire the expense of sending its entire fleet. Otherwise, the Imperial Armada would already be orbiting this world. Ego let out a low, contemptuous laugh. He understood exactly what those casualty reports meant, yet to him the lives of countless mortals were no more than specks of dust in the endless void. Next to the ultimate truths and cosmic power he hungered for, they were as insignificant as ants. Ego was not interested in their petty battles for survival. His eyes were fixed on a much grander prize. So tell me, he taunted, voice laced with arrogance, how do you propose to defeat me? His tone was deliberately provocative, mocking the boldness of his opponent, known only as Number 18. He had every reason to be supremely confident. Aside from a handful of elder gods, cosmic entities, and those few exalted celestials, he feared almost nothing. Even now, as a strange energy radiated from the woman before him and sent a jolt of unease through his spine, he held fast to the belief that he was the universe's mightiest force, capable of overcoming any challenger. In that moment, memories of the Marvel Universe's power-scaling systems flickered through his mind. In a realm dominated by technology, a single being rarely ever reached true, unassailable heights of combat prowess. Yet Ego remained undeterred, certain that no one, not even this enigmatic Number 18, could stand against him. Among all non-divine beings, the Eternals, Thanos' own race, stand closest to true gods. They possess Hulk-level strength and physical abilities honed to the zenith of biological evolution, making them one of the universe's rarest and most formidable warrior races. Yet even the might of the Eternals can feel small and helpless when swept up in the relentless torrents of interstellar war. Chapter 1065, Supernova 18. Across the vast battlefield of the cosmos, no individual, even one of the Eternals, can hold out against the combined might of interstellar dreadnoughts bristling with star-destroying weapons. These superweapons can wipe out a warrior in an instant. Take Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, for example. Blessed with the power to fly faster than light and to channel immense energy, she once single-handedly tore apart an enemy cruiser. But it was a lightly armed scout ship, its outer shields offline, a skirmish compared to a true interstellar campaign. Even Thanos, who flaunts his claim as the universe's overlord, cannot conquer by sheer strength alone. Lacking allies, he must still marshal fleets of ships and legions of soldiers to secure his dominance among the stars. In the Marvel Universe, technological supremacy is the ultimate decider of war. We live in an age where eternal power is measured not in raw might, but in what your engines, your weapons, and your shields can deliver. Alien civilizations, scattered like starlight across the void, each follow their own distinct paths of development, unique technology trees and societal structures that reflect their histories and ambitions. In this generation, technology is king, and in this endless war of the worlds, whoever masters it will shape the fate of the universe itself. However, what's most surprising is how often these seemingly invincible civilizations wind up crushed by Earth's heroes, teams like the Avengers, in actual combat. It isn't that the Kree, the Skrulls, or the Shi'ar are inherently weak, it's that they've come to depend almost exclusively on fleet tactics and superweapons, paying little heed to individual combat prowess. In interstellar warfare, bombarding entire worlds from orbit has become standard procedure, and planet-shattering armaments are issued like infantry rifles. By comparison, a single warrior barely registers. Among all alien powers, the Kree Empire, the Skrull Empire, and the Shi'ar Empire stand as the three great pillars of cosmic might. Their capital starships, particularly the most advanced dreadnought classes, are reputed to possess enough firepower to fell even the gods themselves. Any adversary bold enough to challenge them must weigh the cost in blood and treasure. Thinking this through, Ethan couldn't help but smile in contempt. He swept his gaze across the empty void and realized, with a mixture of relief and annoyance, that there was no sign of the Galactic Empire's fleet. This was the very civilization strong enough to rival the three cosmic giants and to have previously dealt them crushing defeats. Yet now, they were nowhere to be found. Ethan knew better than anyone how formidable the Galactic Empire's fleet could be. Had their forces been here now, he might have hesitated, even considered surrendering. But the awful truth was that he faced only one woman, a lone female opponent. His pride bristled at the insult. He fixed number 18 with a venomous glare, as though he could devour her whole. "Who do you think you are? A god?" His tone dripped with contempt. No, 18 merely brushed back a strand of hair and offered a small, self-assured smile. "I'm no god," she replied evenly, "but I can kill gods." She spoke as if announcing an unarguable fact. Ethan's sneer deepened. "Is that so? Then enlighten me. What power is invincible?" "No," 18 took a measured step forward, her eyes bright with conviction. "Ethan, across every corner of this cosmos there exist forces beyond imagination. What you wield, your world-bending laws, the planet you treat like an extension of your own flesh, is formidable, yes, but it is not absolute." Ethan's lip curled in scorn. "Go on, surprise me." "True invincibility," she said, her voice low and steady, "lies in the unexpected, the spark of life, the will to change fate, and the courage to defy destiny. You built your empire on certainty. I thrive on its unraveling." Silence fell between them, charged with fate's heavy promise. The battlefield held its breath. "Is the energy in your body really so enticing?" Ego's voice dripped with amusement. "Humph. Even the universe's mightiest power is little more than a nuisance to me." Android 18 drew in a slow, steady breath, channeling every ounce of her strength. Inside her, Ki flared like a newborn star, illuminating her form from within. Her muscles knotted under her skin, poised like a coiled spring. Then, in an instant, she thrust both palms forward. A devastating wave of Ki, condensed into its purest, deadliest form, erupted from her hands, roaring through the air like a leviathan. The very fabric of space shuddered, shredded by invisible claws. Where the wave tore past, reality split open in jagged fractures, as if glass had shattered and sent razor-sharp shards flying in every direction. The sheer force of her attack felt otherworldly, an alien storm with the raw power to annihilate gods and erase entire worlds. It was Dragon Ball's signature ki, unleashed within the Marvel cosmos, and its destructive potential was beyond imagination. Yet as the energy surged and crackled, Ego watched in unconcerned silence. A lazy smile curved his lips, eyes glinting with condescension. In his gaze, 18's raw display of power amounted to nothing more than a trivial challenge. Ego watched Android 18's power flare before him and barely concealed a smirk. In his opinion, her strength, impressive as it was, fell miles short of threatening him. Her vast reserves of ki were, to him, nothing more than a mild stimulant, a trivial challenge at best, so long as she remained at her current level. Even Cell's perfect body, rumored to be capable of wiping out entire solar systems, counted for less in Ego's eyes. Compared to Ego's own might, 18 was at worst a fleeting annoyance. But Ego was overlooking one crucial detail, and Ethan knew it. He had secretly woven Saiyan genes into 18's very cells, transforming her into a Saiyan hybrid. Hybrids had a notorious reputation for unlocking Super Saiyan power under duress. All Ethan's hope lay in that one overlooked edge. Without warning, Ego unleashed a torrent of planetary shattering energy. It surged outward in a rolling wave, intent on crushing anything in its path. Android 18 met him head-on, channeling her chi into a defensive barrier that flared like a second sun. The two energies collided with earth-shattering force, a cosmic collision of titanic proportions. Stars shuddered in dread, the very fabric of space rippled, and for a heartbeat it felt as if the galaxy itself had been shaken to its core. And then it happened. Deep within 18's transformed body, something stirred, an imperceptible shift at first, like the flutter of a fledgling heart. Her aura flickered from blue-white to a radiant gold, sparking electric arcs of raw power. Muscles tensed and expanded, her hair quivering at the roots as if already reaching for the legendary Super Saiyan form. Ego's confident grin faltered. He had dismissed her as nothing more than a novelty. Now he realized that underestimating her had been his gravest mistake. As Android 18's energy swirled and intensified, a golden glow enveloped her, proof that the hybrid within had finally awakened. Nober, 18's eyes flared with blinding brilliance, golden light pouring from her pupils like twin stars igniting the night sky. Her hair shot straight up, transforming into gleaming gold spikes topped with a bold crest and horn-like protrusions, radiating an overwhelming, almost suffocating presence. Rivers of molten flame rippled across her form, as if she had become a living sun, illuminating the void around her. This was Super Number 18. In an instant, her power had surged 50-fold, both her combat strength and her energy reserves multiplied beyond measure. Ego stood frozen, unable to comprehend the spectacle before him. The energy he had once regarded as a sweet, invigorating tonic now roiled with deadly intensity. His planetary-scale power felt brittle and exposed beneath her golden inferno, as if a single flare could shatter it entirely. Chapter 1066. Slaughter of Gods. Ego, the Eternal, staggered backward, his lips paling as he struggled to contain his fear. What is this?" he whispered, voice trembling. Before him stood android number 18, her silhouette wreathed in a blistering golden light. The very air quivered with energy so overwhelming that even a cosmic-level formidable being like Ego felt it reverberate through his core. Number 18's eyes sparkled with fierce excitement. She took a deliberate step forward, fists clenching at her sides. "At last," she breathed, "I've found someone who can push me to my limits." Each word seemed to crackle through the cosmos as her new power surged outward, shattering the invisible shackles that had bound her strength. Under ordinary circumstances, 18's power level matched that of a Super Saiyan 1, on par with warriors such as Son Goku or Son Gohan. But this transformation, this ascent into Super Saiyan 2 territory, was beyond anything she had ever experienced. According to the Dragon Ball power scale, a Super Saiyan 2 wields roughly twice the might of a Super Saiyan 1, enough to eclipse even Cell in his perfect form and rival Gohan at his peak. Yet the intensity radiating from 18 now suggested she was rewriting those very benchmarks. Ego's confidence crumbled as the brilliant aura around 18 swelled, illuminating distant stars and casting long shadows across the battlefield. He realized, with dawning horror, that this was no ordinary fight. It was a reckoning. And at its center stood a warrior reborn, hungering for the showdown of a lifetime. Android 18's untransformed power already rivaled a Super Saiyan 1, and when she transformed, her strength multiplied 50-fold, outstripping even Super Saiyan 2 Son Gohan. Driven to surpass every limit, she has never let up in her training. With the advanced gravity chamber that Ethan and the Galactic Empire provided, she endures pressures far beyond Earth's normal gravity, forcing her body to adapt and break through every barrier. Under those extreme conditions, her baseline strength quietly ascended to the level of Goku's full-power Super Saiyan 1, second only to Perfect Cell. Now, as she stands before him, her entire form is wreathed in blinding golden flames, each strand of hair and every taut muscle radiating raw energy, like a sunrise blazing in the void of space. Beautiful and terrifying all at once, she exudes a vitality and ferocity never before seen. Even Ego Star, confronted by Android 18's transformation, feels genuine peril, and he knows better than to underestimate her. Ethan took a steadying breath, centered himself, and reshaped his Ego Star form in an instant. What had looked like an ordinary planet exploded into a towering behemoth, tens of thousands of feet tall, wrapped in twisted spatial rifts and howling energy storms. A terrifying aura radiated from him, so vast that nearby stars seemed to shrink before his presence. This was the peak of his power, the God Ego form. Yet Android 18 stood before him, as calm as ever. Her golden eyes blazed with an unquenchable thirst for battle, Super Saiyan blood surging through her veins. Each heartbeat rang out like a thunderous war drum across the universe, stoking the fires of her fighting spirit. Clad in a sleek combat suit, etched with energy-conducting sigils, she felt the patterns ignite as her power swelled, soft glows dancing across her suit, perfectly mirroring the golden flames flickering around her. Lost in the thrill of transformation, she barely registered the magnitude of Ethan's new form. If anything, a confident smile tugged at her lips, betraying her eagerness for the fight ahead. Android 18 stood alone on the barren plain, her heart pounding with anticipation. After months of grueling training, she hungered for a challenge worthy of her newly honed powers, to feel once more the thrill of pushing beyond her limits as a Super Saiyan. She fixed Ethan with a steady gaze and called out into the stillness. "Are you ready?" Silence answered. Ethan remained unmoving, his expression unreadable. Gone was the opponent she'd once toyed with. Now she saw only a god whose power radiated like a rising sun. His aura pulsed with a heat and intensity she'd never felt before, and in that moment, she knew this would be the hardest fight either of them had ever faced. Ethan drew in a deep breath and let his energy coalesce. The air around him ignited with violet light as he shaped his ki into a massive, hammer-shaped weapon, its head glowing like molten metal in a cosmic forge. Then, with a single, merciless motion, he brought the hammer down. The purple behemoth cleaved through the sky, trailing a comet-bright streak of energy in its wake. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield, a thunderous roar that shook the earth itself. This was no ordinary strike. It was a harbinger of ruin, a promise of unstoppable devastation aimed straight at Android 18. She braced herself, muscles coiled, every fiber of her being ready to meet the onslaught. The true test of her strength had begun. Stars trembled along the hammer's path, their light dimming under the crushing pressure of the colossal purple warhammer. Some were rent apart entirely, shattering into brilliant, short-lived fragments that exploded like cosmic fireworks before fading into the void. Yet number 18 did not flinch. She floated in the vacuum of space, motionless and resolute, her posture as unwavering as a carved idol. "Come on," she challenged. As the purple hammer loomed closer, the golden flames that danced around number 18 blazed even brighter, casting a fierce, radiant glow across the cosmos. Ripples of raw power radiated from her, making nearby stars quiver as if the very fabric of reality feared her might. Then, with a deafening clash, the purple hammer struck her golden aura. In that instant, time itself seemed to halt. The shockwave eclipsed distant galaxies and stilled drifting star clusters. Even the endless sea of stars fell silent under the sheer force of the collision, as if the universe itself had paused to witness this titanic struggle. A titanic wave of force rolled outward like a cosmic tsunami, engulfing star after star in its path. Space itself seemed to tear open, revealing a black hole abyss that devoured every shred of light and matter. Brilliant flashes from the collision lit up the farthest reaches of the void, creating a spectacle of both sight and sound. A colossal purple hammer clashed with a roaring pillar of golden flame, sometimes merging into a fiery vortex, sometimes rebounding with cataclysmic force. Each impact rocked the cosmos with a deafening roar, as though the universe itself shuddered. Each spark of fusion unleashed even more savage power, threatening to consume all creation. Under the weight of this titanic struggle, the very fabric of the universe began to warp. Star paths were bent out of shape, once orderly galaxies dissolved into chaos, and the normally stable weave of time and space splintered. It was as if this phenomenal force intended to shatter the cosmic balance and plunge everything back into primordial chaos. Chapter 1067, The Chasm Between Cosmic God and Lesser Divinity. The golden blaze that erupted from number 18 refused to yield beneath the onslaught of the colossal purple hammer. In that instant, the very fabric of the universe quivered. The flame writhed like a living dragon, coiling and thrashing beneath the hammer's weight, yet never extinguishing. Each time the purple hammer struck, it seemed to crush the flame entirely, but the golden fire was alive. Time and again it burst free from the crushing blows, each resurgence more brilliant than the last. Streaming ribbons of golden light radiated raw power, drawn from the deepest reaches of creation itself. Every shaft of brilliance carried within it the paradox of destruction and renewal, weaving together a barrier no force could breach. As the hammer's energy dissolved against that living wall of flame, the light consolidated, swelling into an irresistible tide. At its peak, the golden inferno roared back, reversing the hammer's momentum with a force that rivaled a cosmic wave. Launched by the rebound, the purple hammer arcs through space in a perfect curve, like a meteor streaking across an endless night sky, tracing a brilliant arc before disappearing into the void. A wave of violet energy, fueled by Ethan's wrath, roared across the void, but as the seconds ticked by, its ferocity ebbed. The massive purple warhammer he had summoned contracted in midair, its solid form melting into a curling wisp of luminous smoke that dissipated into nothingness. Ethan stared, incredulous. He had been certain his divine hammer could crush any foe, that its very existence would cow opponents into submission. Yet here it was, utterly undone by number 18's power. He felt his breath catch in his throat, his eyes widening as the last glimmer of purple vanished. A cold, echoing voice cut through the silence by means of pure energy transmission. "Is that all your godly strength can muster?" "No." 18's tone was dripping with scorn. She hovered a short distance away, flames of molten gold swirling around her form. In that radiance, she looked every bit the celestial goddess, untouchable, majestic, and utterly confident. Ethan's anger flared anew, but beneath it lay a churning mix of shock and disbelief. No words came. He could only watch as the last embers of his failed assault faded into the endless dark. Ethan's roar echoed across the void. As a self-styled god of the universe, he had never before been treated with such blatant contempt. Energy crackled around his clenched fists, ready to unleash devastation, yet number 18 refused to give him the opening. In the blink of an eye, she rematerialized at his side. Her golden fist, wreathed in crackling thunder and lightning, lunged at his midsection with blinding speed and force. Ethan slammed his hands together, conjuring a seething barrier of raw energy, but it was little more than mist to her. Her punch ripped through the shield as though it were air, driving into his ribs with bone-shaking ferocity. Pain exploded through Ethan's body, knocking him off balance. He staggered back, each breath a rasping gasp as though his very bones threatened to shatter. Yet before he could gather himself, no, 18 was already upon him again, her form a lightning-fast blur, her next strike moments away. The golden fist arced through space again, driving straight for Ego's heart. This time, the cosmic deity was powerless to stop Android 18's assault. His vast form, larger than stars, became his greatest weakness. Too massive and slow to dodge, he could only watch as her blow tore through him, over and over, opening jagged wounds that flared with golden fire, threatening to incinerate him from within. Ego let out a wrenching cry as his body began to collapse into fragments of energy, each shard scattering across the void. Yet even this devastation could not destroy a god. Drawing on the universe's ambient flux, his indestructible spirit coalesced into a flickering, illusory image. In an instant, he stood before Android 18 once more, eyes burning with unyielding hatred. Though diminished in form, Ego remained far more than a mere opponent. As a cosmic god, his power and wisdom transcended any mortal understanding, an enigma forged by countless eons and infinite worlds. And now, face to face with Android 18, he would prove that even the fiercest blow could not end his reign. Ethan's mind moved with the precision of a star map, each thought tracing the silent arcs and hidden currents of space and time. Though no, 18's assault struck like a cosmic tempest, rending flesh, shattering bone, and setting his very soul ablaze. He refused to yield. She was a terror unleashed, a primeval colossus with limitless power in every blow, capable of smiting stars to dust. Yet Ethan had pinpointed her fatal flaw. For all her raw might and boundless energy, Gnome 18 was blind to the deeper architecture of the cosmos. She piled up strength and vitality like hoarded gold, never forging them into a blade or a tool. She wielded numbers, not the underlying laws that govern them. True cosmic gods stood apart, not merely through brute force, but through mastery of cosmic principles. They were as much sages as they were warriors, attuned to the subtlest molecular tremors that heralded the birth of life, keenly aware of the wandering elements that scaffold the universe, and versed in the grand cycles and hidden rules binding every particle. As No. 18 charged in once more, fists blazing with raw energy, Ethan reached deep into that lattice of universal law. He bent the invisible threads of space-time around him, letting her furious onslaught pass harmlessly through a shifting prism he had woven at the last moment. In that instantaneous collapse of angles, her momentum faltered, and Ethan struck back with the refined precision of cosmic geometry. It was not merely force that felled her, but the profound guidance of rules she could neither see nor comprehend. As she staggered, energy dissipating into the void, Ethan stood unmoved, a testament to the unbreakable union of power and wisdom that defines the true gods of the cosmos. Ethan perceived the very fabric of the world, the hidden lattice of matter and energy that no ordinary eye or intellect could grasp. In an instant, he understood the laws that wove reality together and the countless possibilities that sprang from their interlocking rules. By contrast, Number 18, formidable as she was, moved like a blindfolded barbarian, swinging her colossal hammer with sheer brute force but utterly ignorant of the universe's deeper order. To Ethan, her seemingly unstoppable blows were no more threatening than a child's tantrum in a toy shop. Her strength was like an untamed stallion running itself to death, violent and spectacular at first, but inevitably doomed to collapse into the abyss of defeat. A cold, contemptuous smile curved Ethan's lips. His voice cut through the air like an ancient winter gale. "So this is all you've got," he murmured, brimming with absolute confidence that victory was already his. Chapter 1068, Ethan, Prepare for Class. Mortals have always believed that raw power, if strong enough, can send bricks flying. But before the vast, immutable laws of the universe, that belief is little more than an empty fantasy. No matter how many times you amplify your strength, hundreds of millions of times, even a trillion, it all amounts to nothing if you haven't mastered the deeper rules that govern existence itself. Ego, the universe's primordial being, uttered his scorn with chilling clarity. His eyes, as if piercing through the very fabric of time and space, fixed on Ethan, who teetered on the edge of defeat. This was no mere guesswork. Ego's foresight sprang from an intimate command of cosmic law. From his vantage atop the summit of victory, he looked down on Ethan with divine arrogance, a certainty that transcended any mortal frame. Ego's plan was ruthless in its elegance. He would weave Ethan's raw power into the hidden web of universal rules, forcing him to struggle within that invisible network until every last ounce of his strength was drained. And so the lesson began. No mere display of force could stand against one who truly understood the mechanics of the cosmos. This wasn't just a tactical formation, it was a profound lesson in the nature of power. Ethan reminded himself that true strength isn't measured by how much energy you command, but by how skillfully you bend that energy to your will. The ego technique, he realized, worked exactly like the art of a master wizard. Every gesture, every breath was a precise manipulation of arcane rules, causing an adversary's attack to dissolve before it even took shape. But as the battle raged, Number 18 found herself gripped by a panic she had never known. She had always taken pride in her seemingly indestructible power, certain it could surmount any obstacle. Now, though, a chilling terror welled up inside her, a mixture of awe at the unknown and dread at the fragility of her own strength. She felt her energy being siphoned away, as if an immense invisible hand was drawing it out grain by grain. With each passing heartbeat, she sank deeper into a void of powerlessness, an abyss so oppressive it nearly stole her breath. She fought desperately, summoning every ounce of will to resist, but her efforts were like flailing at smoke. No matter how she struck or how hard she pushed, she found no leverage, no anchor to reclaim her stolen might. In that endless shadowed moment, she realized that raw power means nothing without mastery. And mastery, she now understood in her deepest bone, was precisely what she was losing. What terrified Ethan most was the very fabric of space itself shifting around him. Distances that once felt trivial now stretched out like endless chasms, each step forward draining him of energy 100 times faster than before. His lightning-quick speed, his greatest pride, was suddenly bound by invisible chains, leaving him all but immobilized. It was as if he'd been launched into an entirely new dimension, one governed by rules and logic he'd never encountered. In this strange realm, even drawing on his power required an unfamiliar reasoning he couldn't grasp. He groped through the darkness, desperate for any hint of an escape, but every move felt like stumbling through a dense fog, directionless and futile. Back in the normal universe, he could easily outpace light itself and hop between stars. Here, though, he was rooted to the spot, no matter how fiercely he struggled. The effect was crushing. Abandoned by every ally, stranded in an alien void, Ethan felt utterly alone and helpless. Her fists, once powerful enough to cow entire battalions, now meant nothing but empty air. It was as if an invisible barrier sapped her strength, every strike dissolving harmlessly against her own shadow. A cruel smile curved Ego's lips. He relished Number 18's mounting desperation, like an artist admiring a masterpiece. She had walked straight into his web of rules. Until she deciphered and mastered those laws, escape from this boundless cage was impossible. For someone as learned as Number 18, it truly was a dead end. "I told you to study harder," Ego murmured, his tone dripping with contempt, "but you never listened." Silence folded back in, until a sudden voice sliced through it, sharp and unexpected. Ego stiffened, eyes darting across the modified battlefield. Every inch of this arena had been warped by his power. Spatial transmission was blocked, teleportation nullified. He had left no loophole for Number 18, or so he'd thought. Now, the emergence of this mysterious voice unsettled him like nothing before. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing harshly in the void. In that moment, the balance of power, once so firmly in his grasp, teetered on the edge of the unknown. Space here stretches beyond any boundary of normal reality. Its scale is literally infinite. Such a figure seems absurd, yet under the power of spatial law, this vast dimension is undeniably real. No matter how fiercely Number 18 pushes forward, she cannot close the gap to Ego. The distance between them has been stretched into infinity. Ego has distorted the very fabric of space, deflecting her assault effortlessly. Her tremendous power tears through layer after layer of spatial barriers, like a blade cutting countless membranes, only to weaken with each pass until it collapses in futility. Then, unexpectedly, a new life form appears within this field dimension, one that Ego neither senses nor acknowledges. Ethan. Relief surges through Number 18 when she sees him. With Ethan here, her fear vanishes. "Ethan, why are you here?" she demands, bewildered. He offers a faint smile, eyes flicking between her and Ego. "I've been keeping an eye on you," he replies calmly. "I sensed you might need help, so I came." Number 18 rolls her eyes. Does he really expect her to believe that? If he'd been watching her so closely, why only show up now? Still, a quiet warmth blossoms in her chest, a sweetness she refuses to admit aloud. Ethan arrived the moment she found herself in danger, an impressive feat that thrilled her. "Time to teach you a lesson," he said, lifting number 18 into his arms. Egg's eyes blazed with anger at being so thoroughly ignored. "And what exactly do you think you can do?" he snapped. "The spatial dimension of this field is infinitely larger than normal space. Ridiculous as it sounds, once the laws of space take hold, that infinity becomes real. No matter how hard you and number 18 push forward, you'll never close the gap, because our separation is literally boundless." Ethan simply shook his head. "Egg, you're mistaken. The laws of space are powerful, but they're not unbreakable. You only achieve this infinite stretch because you've mastered some aspects of spatial manipulation, but you don't grasp the true nature of those laws." With that, Ethan tightened his grip on number 18 and prepared to prove it. Chapter 1069. Number 18 on the verge of becoming a spatial master. Ego let out a derisive laugh. "Please, this is all quibbling. Space rules boil down to infinity and the infinitesimal. I've already mastered them. Don't pretend you can trick me." Ethan met Ego's sneer without flinching. "Rules are nothing more than expressions of the universe," he said calmly. "They're not fixed. They evolve as the cosmos itself evolves. You've managed to trap number 18 because, for now, you understand these rules better than she does. But if you believe you can bind her forever, you're gravely mistaken." He took a step closer, eyes alight with conviction. "The essence of spatial rules isn't merely about infinite distance or points of zero size. It lies in the deeper principles of relativity and interconnection. Imagine," Ethan continued, "every point in space as a single thread in an immense tapestry. Each filament links to countless others through unseen but potent bonds. Together, they weave the grand design of the cosmos. These connections aren't limited by mere distance. They're the very backbone of reality." Ego's scorn wavered as he absorbed Ethan's words. The air between them seemed to tremble with unspoken power. No 18, on the cusp of mastering these same principles, would soon discover just how fluid the laws of space could be. And when she did, even Ego's confident grip on her fate might unravel completely. Ethan's voice was calm, but carried an unshakable conviction. "The reason you can warp space, stretching a few steps into a twisting labyrinth, is that you violently sever the natural bonds between spatial points. That leaves each fragment isolated and disoriented. Yet you've overlooked something crucial. Isolation itself is a deeper expression of space's rules. It reveals an underlying potential you've never tapped." Ego's face darkened into a scowl. He had never imagined Ethan understood spatial theory so profoundly. "Then tell me," he hissed, "how do you undo my space construct?" Ethan offered a faint, confident smile. "Undo isn't quite the right word. I'm going to rebuild. My goal is to reconnect those broken links between spatial nodes, to weave the threads of space back together. Once that network is restored, your barrier simply collapses, and number 18 will be free." He turned to the chained figure at his side. "Enough talk. Number 18, it's time you learned." She looked up at him, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Me? But I don't know anything. I'm illiterate. I'm just a—" Her voice trailed off as she pointed helplessly at herself. Ethan knelt beside her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Knowledge alone doesn't grant power or insight. You don't need a library's worth of books to understand the rules of space. I'll guide you. Trust me, you'll learn more than you ever imagined." Ethan smiled warmly. "You already possess the power to reshape space itself, a true manifestation of wisdom. You just haven't realized it yet, or learned to wield it. Often we think we can't change things simply because we've never tried. Trust yourself, number 18. You're far stronger than you imagine." A spark of hope flickered in number 18's eyes. "But I know nothing about these rules. How do I begin to learn?" "First," Ethan said, "you must learn to sense space's subtle shifts. Close your eyes and let your heart take in everything around you. You'll discover that space isn't static. It's like a river, constantly flowing and transforming. These movements may be so slight they almost escape notice, but they're very real. They're the living pulse of space itself. Your task is to detect these currents, understand their patterns, and weave yourself into the fabric of space." As he spoke, Ethan's tone was calm and magnetic, as if he were gently parting a fog of doubt to reveal a whole new world to number 18. Space, a realm so commonplace we often take it for granted, yet so intricately woven with power and rule that it becomes a labyrinth in itself. Let's begin at the foundation. Ethan held out his hand and touched a single, invisible, int in the air. Points are the most basic elements of space. They have no size or shape, only pure existence. Yet from countless points, we can trace lines. He swept his fingers forward, drawing an unseen path. A line has direction. It can be straight or curved, but in every case it connects two or more points, breathing dynamic life into the void. Next, Ethan rotated his hands to frame an imaginary boundary. Surfaces arise when lines close in on themselves. They have area, flat like an endless plane or curved like a perfect sphere. Picture a vast meadow under your feet or the smooth curve of a globe in your hands. At his gesture, those surfaces seem to hover, translucent and shimmering, before them. Now stack one surface atop another, and you create volume, three-dimensional space. This is the world we inhabit, a stage defined by depth, height, and width. No 18 watched in awe, as if witnessing the universe's building blocks assembling themselves before his eyes. Ethan's voice grew softer, almost reverent. Three-dimensional space is at once the most familiar and the most mysterious realm we know. Here, every object has length, width, and height, and we can move freely through every corner. But the mystery of space goes far beyond 3 dimensions. Imagine if space weren't limited to length, width, and height. What would that be like? Ethan paused, letting the question hang in the quiet chamber. Number 18's eyes sparkled with curiosity. In 4-dimensional space, he began, we add a time axis to the 3 spatial coordinates we know. That means, in a 4-dimensional world, you could see your past self and glimpse the various paths your future might take. And if you venture into even higher dimensions, the very fabric of reality bends in ways we can barely imagine. Time distorts, space folds in on itself, and you can teleport from one point to another, or even cross time itself to meet your past or future self. No 18 leaned forward, captivated. It was as if Ethan's words had opened a door to a brand new universe, one brimming with infinite possibilities and challenges. So how do you learn to control such a space? She asked, her voice a mix of wonder and determination. Ethan met her gaze. Mastering a higher dimensional realm requires more than raw power. You need a deep understanding of space's fundamental laws. First, you must train your perception to sense the hidden dimensions woven into our reality. Understanding space is like a blind man touching an elephant. You only truly grasp its nature when you feel its essence, Ethan said, gesturing for Agent 18 to close her eyes. She obeyed, drawing in a slow, steady breath. Ethan's voice softened as he guided her. Picture your consciousness as a shaft of light, piercing through matter and plunging into the cosmos. There, you'll sense space's heartbeat, catch its faint whispers, and even glimpse the threads that bind distant points together, threads normally hidden from sight. Following his instructions, Agent 18 relaxed deeper, her mind shedding the weight of her physical form. She envisioned herself drifting weightlessly, no longer confined by flesh or gravity. Gradually, the invisible strands of space began to reveal themselves, a vast, shimmering web stretching across infinity, each filament pulsing with hidden energy. Ethan's tone grew firmer. Now, extend your will and touch those connections. Reach out and feel their rhythm. Let them guide you. She felt a curious warmth under her skull, as if her thoughts had turned tangible. Tentatively, she reached out with her intent, and one of the glowing strands responded, gently tugging back. A spark of triumph flickered through her. She was no longer merely observing space. She was part of it. Ethan's voice echoed in her mind, steady and encouraging. Keep going. Let the fabric of space become your ally. Agent 18 smiled in the darkness, ready to explore the hidden architecture of the universe. Chapter 1070, Student Number 18. Picture your will as an invisible hand, brushing against the strands of space and guiding them to weave and rearrange themselves at your command. This takes patience and concentration. Each attempt is an exploration of the universe's hidden rules. On the 18th day of his training, Ethan focused on transforming his determination into a subtle yet palpable force. It was neither the clench of a muscle nor a mere surge of spirit, but something that transcended both, a direct touch on the fabric of the cosmos. Inwardly, he felt an electric link form between his mind and the boundless expanse around him, as if pure energy flowed through an unseen conduit connecting him to every star, every planet, every void. Awe and exhilaration coursed through him. Summoning his will, Ethan reached out to those delicate spatial threads, the ethereal filaments that underpin reality itself. At first, they quivered unpredictably, sometimes yielding and sometimes rebelling, as though a band of mischievous children were teasing him from the shadows. With each breath, each heartbeat, he coaxed them again and again, learning their hidden tendencies and subtleties. No easy triumph came on his first try, yet every refusal only sharpened his focus. He reminded himself that space was not a dead expanse, but a living tapestry, responsive to intent and guided by unspoken laws. And so he continued, undeterred, determined to master the language of unseen forces and claim his place among those who could bend reality with nothing but the strength of their will. 18 felt an unseen force tugging at his will, sometimes pulling him in, sometimes thrusting him away. He drifted in chaos, unsure where to anchor himself. But as moments stretched on, he began to sense the ebb and flow of spatial currents. Gradually, he learned to guide them, molding their patterns, weaving them together with growing precision. Excellent, Ethan said with satisfaction. You've taken your first step toward mastering the laws of space. When 18 opened his eyes again, the world before him had shifted. He sensed every subtle fluctuation in the fabric of reality, as if the universe itself were whispering its secrets. A surge of excitement and unease washed over him. He had entered a new realm, one shaped entirely by his will. The power you now wield can reshape space's very structure, Ethan continued. Don't think of space as a static backdrop, but as a living canvas, one you can bend, distort, and redefine. Ethan paused to gather his thoughts, then spoke with both scientific precision and philosophical depth. According to Einstein's general theory of relativity, mass and energy actually curve space and time. As a super saiyan, you've reached a level of power where you don't just feel that curvature, you can influence it to some extent with your will. He held out his hand, palm up, as though cupping an invisible force. On top of that, your senses have been heightened by chai. Through chai, you become aware of space itself, its bends, its folds. Think of chai as an all-pervasive energy field that binds everything together. With practice, you learn not only to sense this field, but to guide it. Ethan's voice grew quieter, more deliberate. Your perception now goes beyond sight, sound, and touch. You'll sense fluctuations in energy, distortions in space, subtle tremors that most people can't even imagine. Mastering this new form of awareness is the key to truly understanding and manipulating the fabric of reality. No, 18 leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. She could almost feel the raw potential of what Ethan described, and a thrill ran through her at the thought of learning to bend space itself. 7. The web of chi. For the first time, Number 18 perceived her power through a lens that was both scientific and mysterious. Under Ethan's steady guidance, she closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and allowed her awareness to sink into the river of chi flowing through her body. Bit by bit, an unprecedented connection led within her. Countless invisible threads seemed to stretch from her very core to every corner of the surrounding world. Ethan's voice, gentle as a spring breeze, floated into her mind. In quantum mechanics, he explained, the observer doesn't just watch, she participates. The act of observing changes the state of what's observed. That deep-seated interaction, what we call coupling, bridges gaps of time and space, linking things that appear distant into a single, unified whole. Through disciplined practice, you're learning to converse with that coupling. As the last syllable faded, Number 18 felt a tingling awareness pulse along her skin, as if the air itself had grown alive. When she opened her eyes, they shone with clarity and awe. She was no longer merely wielding power. She had become part of the universe's intricate interplay, its unseen currents now at her command. She felt both humbled by the vastness and irresistibly drawn to explore it. Anything that can be coupled can be influenced. Ethan nodded. Once you master that principle, you can navigate ego's infinite realm. He leaned forward. Ego's space may appear limitless, but even the universe abides by 4 fundamental forces: gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear interactions. Your power springs from a deep understanding of these laws. By wielding chi, an energy that transcends conventional physics, you'll be able to detect the weak points within that realm. From there, you can intervene, reshape, and ultimately control it. Number 18 closed her eyes and began to visualize how she might use her own energy and heightened perception to pinpoint the crucial node in that boundless expanse, much like locating the decisive switch buried in a complex circuit. As she sketched out the mental blueprint, she realized something new was unfolding between her and Ethan. This collaborative exchange, unlike anything she had experienced before, filled her with an extraordinary sense of calm and trust. A subtle thrill surged through her veins, sharpening her focus and fueling her resolve. Ethan's words did more than simply inspire her. They ignited a fierce determination within student number 18. At the same time, the surge of chi coursing through her veins sharpened her every sense until even the tiniest molecular vibration registered in her mind. Ethan noticed the subtle changes in her breathing and her pulse, but he said nothing. This was his first time guiding someone this far, and he found the experience unexpectedly exhilarating. Teacher and student, they had embarked on a kind of challenge, one neither had anticipated would prove so thrilling. Across their mental battlefield, Ego refused to stand idly by as Ethan and number 18 chipped away at his infinite realm. He reacted almost instantaneously, mere femtoseconds elapsing before he countered, but it was never fast enough. Ethan had stretched the time stream around them, giving number 18 the precious extra moments she needed to learn, to adapt, and to grow stronger by the second. Then, in what appeared to be an unremarkable heartbeat, everything changed. No. 18 found the crucial node she needed. She inhaled deeply, poured every ounce of her will into that single point, and released it in one shattering burst. The space around them groaned and tore as though something had yanked it apart from the inside. Cracks snaked outward, slicing through the fabric of Ego's infinite realm, and for the first time, even Ego's defenses showed faint signs of strain. Chapter 1071, Eliminating Ego's Success. Number 18 laughed, a subdued sound that nonetheless brimmed with genuine triumph. Though he kept his grin hidden, the exhilaration in his voice was unmistakable. Ego stood frozen, utterly unprepared. From his vantage point, barely a femtosecond had passed, yet number 18 had already ripped open the fabric of his once impregnable infinite space with a speed that bordered on the miraculous. The sheer contrast obliterated Ego's familiar sense of time, like a blade carving through his consciousness. He was forced to confront an unsettling truth. Time itself, that most enigmatic of dimensions, had been quietly twisted by an outside force. Still, Ego quickly recognized that the distortion wasn't aimed at him personally. As a cosmic god, he wielded power and wisdom far beyond a mere mortal's grasp. He understood the laws of time and space better than anyone, and he knew that even the legendary time gem would struggle to alter his temporal perception. Yet here it was, his own sense of time, the foundation of his existence, had been breached, and standing before him, calmly triumphant, was number 18. Ego's mind raced. Only a being with near-perfect mastery of time's laws, backed by another infinity stone, like the Power Stone, could truly unlock the Time Stone's full might without being exhausted by its power drain. She actually rewrote her own sense of time, he thought, astonished. Even he who had perfected his command of space, bending, creating, or erasing it at will, had never pierced the core mystery of time. Its passage remained an enigma beyond his reach. Yet number 18 had not only breached Ego's boundless realm of space, she had emerged immeasurably stronger. Rather than accumulating knowledge bit by bit, she had vaulted across the threshold of understanding in a near-miraculous instant. Her grasp of spatial physics and energy dynamics now soared to heights no one had ever imagined. Although number 18 has never sat in a university lecture hall or pored over textbooks, her chi-enhanced senses grant her an instinctive mastery of science that outshines even the sharpest minds of mankind. Where top researchers still grapple with equations and push their most advanced instruments to the limit, she experiences space itself as a tangible, malleable medium. She can see the folds and creases of space-time, trace hidden passages threading through the cosmos, and detect distortions so slight they elude any conventional detector. To human scientists, these capacities remain little more than speculative theory, yet to her, they're as concrete as the air she breathes. Energy physics is equally intuitive. She understands energy not as an abstract concept, but as a living force, flowing, transforming, and converging throughout the universe. It is both the wellspring from which all creation springs and the ultimate catalyst of annihilation. In her hands, the boundary between theory and reality dissolves, and the deepest secrets of existence lie open to her gaze. Number 18's mastery of energy went far beyond anything human scientists had ever achieved. Where they relied on limited observations and shaky assumptions, she perceived every fluctuation in the ether, detecting the subtlest pre-release tremors and predicting exactly where and how violently an energy discharge would erupt. With each passing day, her understanding of spatial and energetic physics grew sharper, and she set out to turn theory into a battlefield advantage. By precisely warping space to channel and concentrate energy, she fashioned a weapon of terrifying precision. Unlike conventional explosives, Number 18's technique was ruthlessly efficient and caused virtually no unintended damage. She would bend the surrounding field just enough to guide raw energy into a single searing burst, an energy chi wave that could be dialed in from long-range bombardment to split-second close-quarters strikes. Still, this formidable power left her unsatisfied. There was more to learn, more to perfect, and Number 18 was determined to push her control of space and energy to its very limit. Ethan stood before his workbench, the hum of the lab's power generators echoing his own racing thoughts. Science, he knew, was an endless frontier, and he was determined to push its boundaries. Over the past months, he had begun to merge two disciplines that few had ever dared to connect: spatial physics and energy dynamics. His goal was simple in ambition, but daunting in execution: to invent an entirely new mode of attack by weaving together the fabric of space itself with raw, unleashed power. The challenges were greater than anything Ethan had anticipated. Spatial distortion and energy release had always been studied in isolation. Bringing them into concert proved a monumental task. Yet, under Ethan's steady hand, the two fields began to resonate. He discovered that once a spatial warp passed a critical threshold, the efficiency of energy discharge would abruptly spike, as though space itself had become a living amplifier. Even more astonishing was what happened at precise synchronization points. The distortions and discharges locked step and gave rise to a phenomenon he named space energy resonance. At resonance, the very structure of space seemed to come alive, undulating with high-frequency oscillations. Energy, in turn, swelled like a tidal wave. The two forces fed each other, forging a compact but ferociously potent energy field. This field did more than merely blast targets. It penetrated their spatial matrix, destabilizing them at a fundamental level. The damage it inflicted was deep, chaotic, and all but impossible to repair. With space energy resonance, Ethan realized he held the key to a weapon unlike any before. Now all that remained was to master its power and survive the consequences of wielding it. Ego's eyes widened as Number 18 unleashed her power. "Go to hell," she snarled. In an instant, the very fabric of space began to writhe. Not merely the things within it, but space itself, bending and twisting under her assault. An invisible force rippled outward, sweeping across the galaxy as stars quivered and worlds trembled. Within the contorted void, energy currents surged into brilliant filaments of light. As the spatial distortion and raw energy release reached perfect synchronicity, a cataclysmic wave of chi burst forth, roaring through the heavens like a cosmic tsunami. Ordinarily, such a wave could have obliterated dozens of solar systems, but amplified by the resonance of space itself, its destructive power soared to unimaginable heights. Sensing imminent annihilation, Ego drew upon every ounce of his strength. He reconfigured the surrounding space in a desperate bid to shield himself, twisting its structure into a makeshift barrier. Yet even his prodigious skills proved inadequate. The attack's flawless fusion of spatial warping and unleashed energy forged an unstoppable field, one that defied all his countermeasures and left him teetering on the brink of oblivion. The energy field brimmed with raw destructive force, and it could slice through the very fabric of space, nullifying Ego's power over spatial control. Desperate, Ego hurled himself through the void, twisting and darting in every direction, but the resonant wave of energy had already locked onto his position. No matter how he strained or shifted, he couldn't outrun that relentless torrent. Chapter 1072. The Dragon Ball universe undergoes a radical transformation. Impossible. How could I? Ego's colossal form stood as living proof of billions of years spent devouring stars and amassing cosmic power. Yet now, in the face of that single, searing beam, strong enough to annihilate hundreds of solar systems, all his glory and strength felt insignificant. He could only watch, helpless, as the beam struck him squarely. In an instant, the god Ego began to unravel. His vast, star-forged body disintegrated under the beam's merciless assault. Once brilliant eyes, light years bright, now brimmed with only fear and despair. Panicking, Ego hurled every ounce of his energy outward, as he had countless times before, hoping to consume the threat. But this time, it was different. The spatial energy resonance cannon had unleashed a torrent of power so pure, so immense, that Ego's legendary hunger faltered. He could neither digest nor deflect it. The cosmic stream crashed over him like a tidal wave of living steel, leaving him powerless. A tortured roar tore from Ego's lips as his form collapsed in on itself. Fractured fragments of his divine essence drifted off into the void, extinguished by the overwhelming assault. In mere moments, the being who had once devoured galaxies was no more, reduced to nothing but stardust in the darkness. The once vibrant world, alive with swirling forests, oceans, and cities, had been reduced to something like an ice cube plunged into a furnace. It collapsed in on itself, melting away in an instant. Its outer shell, the fused rock, metals, and even fragments of shattered stars, was stripped away by a blistering wave of energy in just 1/1,000,000th of a second, vanishing into nothingness. Countless elementary particles drifted into the void, rejoining the universe's endless cycle. At the heart of the devastation lay the exposed core of the god Ego, its true essence, its neural center, laid bare before the onslaught. No. Please. Ego's distant, trembling voice crackled through the energy torrent. Spare me. I will swear fealty to the Galactic Empire. A signal pulsed from Ego's dying consciousness, but when number 18 shot a questioning glance at Ethan, he didn't flinch. He remained utterly still, his expression unreadable. She hesitated only a moment before standing down. After all, the Galactic Empire cared little for a solitary cosmic god. The other 3 cosmic empires might have leapt at the chance to harness such power, but not this one. If Ethan wished, he could cultivate legions of universe-level beings. A single god was hardly worth his attention. Even as Ego's memories dissolved into oblivion, and its awareness dissolved like mist, it fought on, desperately clutching at fading strands of hope. But Ethan's resolve was ironclad. In this moment, there would be no mercy. No. Let me go. I can bring untold wealth and knowledge to the Galactic Empire. Ego's voice wavered, grew faint, and finally died away. Its body, and with it, its last spark of consciousness, was engulfed by the crackling energy and scattered as cosmic dust. Star-Lord, standing at the heart of the blast, was effectively obliterated. Yet there was no cataclysmic explosion to shake the cosmos, thanks entirely to number 18's space-sealing prowess. Just before the 2 energies could collide, she conjured a closed pocket of space between them and compressed the entire discharge into a single cubic centimeter. That tiny, self-contained void acted like a bottomless sink, swallowing every ounce of destructive force. In spite of unleashing power greater than a galaxy-shaking supernova, the duel left almost no mark on the wider universe. Nevertheless, cramming so much energy into that infinitesimal capsule did leave its trace. The very fabric of space and time around the sealed chamber twisted and warped under the strain. Under Ethan's command, a tiny black hole, no larger than a soybean, blazed into being against the star-speckled canvas of space. Though minuscule, its gravitational pull was fierce enough to swallow any matter or energy nearby. Fortunately, the anomaly was fleeting. It evaporated in less than 1/100th of a second. The surrounding space snapped back into place, and as if nothing had happened, the cosmos settled into its former silence. Done, Android 18 announced, a satisfied smile lighting her features. Exceptional control. Ethan watched her with quiet pride. She clearly appreciated the elegance of the technique and the rewards of rigorous study. It wouldn't surprise him if, one day, she traded her combat uniform for scholarly robes and pursued knowledge just as fervently as she did a fight. By the way, 18 added, her eyes bright with anticipation, we'll be heading back to the Dragon Ball world soon. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You're going back? Absolutely, she said. I've been looking forward to it. It had been ages since Ethan last set foot in that familiar realm. When he first seized Broly's power, he'd woven it into a pocket dimension of his own design. But over time, he discovered that raw, unbridled strength wasn't his true calling. Reluctantly, he stripped himself of Broly's might and released it, and in doing so, restored the balance. Now, as plans formed to return to the Dragon Ball world, Ethan sensed that new adventures, and perhaps new lessons, awaited them both. Chapter 1: New Threads in Time. Since Ethan was ripped into the Marvel Universe, the Dragon Ball world hangs in uncertainty. Will the Saiyan bloodline ever spawn another Broly? All signs point to more upheaval on the horizon. The once familiar world has already been shaken to its core by Ethan's interventions. Dr. Gero, the reclusive genius who once lurked in shadowy labs, now answers only to Ethan's command. After Ethan and his enigmatic Kryptonian allies routed Frieza, Dr. Gero swept in, absorbing the shattered remnants of Frieza's armada and forging them into an unstoppable empire that spans the cosmos. Now, drawn back into this fractured reality, Ethan pursues two pivotal figures, the time traveler Trunks and the dread-inspiring monster, Future Cell. Trunks' arrival could tear even wider rifts in an already chaotic timeline, while Future Cell, whose very existence once plunged Earth into hopelessness, may hold secrets Ethan has only begun to fathom. But what will Trunks make of this altered world? When he steps through the time portal, he won't find the seasoned warrior he remembers, but rather a young, untested Goku, barely more than a child, who has just set out to recover his grandfather's magical beads. The 4-star Dragon Ball that once hung from Goku's neck now lies in Ethan's possession, and its absence has sent Goku on a quest he believes will restore his heritage. Even Bulma, whose path was irrevocably changed by Ethan's meddling, never crossed Goku's trail. Without their fateful meeting, the Blue Capsule Corporation's brightest mind pursues her own goals, unaware that destiny, as Ethan has rewritten it, no longer runs along its old tracks. As two timelines threaten to collide, Ethan watches patiently. Will Trunks safeguard the future, or tear it apart? What shape will Future Cell take in a universe already bent to Ethan's will? And how will a young Saiyan boy, clutching the hope of his past, grow into the hero the world still desperately needs? The answers lie just beyond the horizon of time, and Ethan intends to see each one revealed. Ethan peered over Dr. Gero's surveillance monitors and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Goku, once the disciplined martial artist trained in the Kami school, was gone. This new Goku was a feral adventurer, driven solely by his quest for the Dragon Balls, with no thoughts of family or legacy. There was no son Gohan waiting at home, no sensei to report to, only a lone warrior stumbling through a world he barely understood. From Ethan's vantage point, the young Saiyan's journey was both brutal and exhilarating. Goku had arrived in this unfamiliar land completely unprepared. Time and again, he'd nearly lost his life before scraping together the strength to go on. Worst of all, he'd forgotten the one rule that haunted every night in his new surroundings: never look at the moon. Each careless glance triggered that all-too-familiar transformation, and soon a towering great ape stood where Goku had been, smashing anything in sight until the moon set and his mind snapped back into place. Ethan wondered how Trunks would react when he finally met this version of Goku, an adult warrior who roamed the globe in relentless pursuit of 7 mystical orbs. It would seem like a crack in time itself. Meanwhile, Android 18 watched her brother from across the facility and felt her heart lift. To her, nothing mattered more than this reunion. Android 17 and 16 had elected to stay behind in the Dragon Ball world, and Dr. Gero continued shuttling between the Galactic Empire's summons and this universe, ever on call. "What are we waiting for? Let's move," 18 urged, her eyes shining with anticipation. With that, the group sprang into action, each one, in their own way, chasing destiny across the stars. Chapter 1073, Future Trunks. Ethan alone possesses the ability to traverse the cosmos. For nearly 2 years he's been out of reach, unable even to bring Android 18 home. The thought weighs on her, and she casts him a worried glance. Ethan slips an arm around her waist, his eyes glowing with focused energy. "Ready?" he asks quietly. Android 18 nods, sliding her hand into his. "With you, always." His aura flares, and the air before them shimmers and tears open into a vast portal, wide enough, if he chose, to carry an entire planet into another universe. In an instant, they vanish from Earth. When the light fades, they find themselves on a gleaming metal platform at the heart of Ethan's army base. Strange starships float in docking bays, corridors hum with otherworldly machinery, and exotic weapons line every shelf. The modest laboratory Ethan once knew has become a universe-spanning fortress. At the center of it all stands Dr. Grow, bent over a console. He startles when the portal closes behind them, but almost immediately regains his composure. With a quick nod, he offers a polite greeting. "Ethan, Android 18, welcome back." Ethan surveys the upgrades with a nod of approval. "Remarkable work." Dr. Grow straightens. "I followed your instructions completely. All Frieza Force units have been withdrawn from these systems. We're now focusing exclusively on the galaxy where Earth resides." Android 18 exhales in relief, and Ethan gives her a reassuring smile. "Excellent. We'll need every advantage if we're to face what's coming." For a moment, the three stand in respectful silence, the hum of alien technology echoing around them. This is only the beginning of their journey, and the universe is waiting. "Your Majesty, here is all the updated intelligence." Dr. Grow set a stack of datapads before Ethan, bowed, and hurried away. Ethan admired talent above all else, so he paid little mind to the doctor's brisk manner. Turning back to the pads, he murmured, "Where is number 17? At that, number 18, who stood just behind Ethan, spoke up. "I've already summoned him, sire." Dr. Grow, without pausing, replied from the doorway, "He'll arrive momentarily." Barely a breath later, the doors slid open and a young boy stepped in. His eyes widened at the sight of his sister. "Sis?" Number 17's surprise melted into relief. He had grown accustomed to her absence and had not expected to see her so soon. "I didn't think I'd get to see you for ages." Number 18 offered him her hand and guided him quietly from the throne room. Ethan, absorbed in his own affairs, scarcely noticed them go. Meanwhile, on Earth, the afternoon sky was calm and uninterrupted until a tiny fissure tore open among the clouds. From that shimmering tear emerged a perfectly spherical starship, its metallic hull gleaming like a polished orb. It shot through the atmosphere like a comet from a distant galaxy, then slowed abruptly, hovering above the sprawling plain below. A low hum vibrated through the air as four slender landing struts extended smoothly from its underside, preparing the ship for descent. The landing struts unfolded like the limbs of some colossal creature, cradling the ship's weight as it descended. At last, they met the ground with a low, resonant thud. Inside the craft, gentle lights bathed the cabin, while a host of advanced instruments flickered through their final diagnostics. A moment later, the hatch slid open, spilling a soft lavender glow across the ramp. Out walked Future Trunks, tall, striking, and dressed in a dark purple Capsule Corporation coat. His lavender hair and eyes were as unusual as they were captivating, giving him an aura of otherworldly mystery. Beneath his coat, a fitted black vest outlined his lean muscle, and at his back hung his expertly forged single-edged sword. Trunks paused at the foot of the ramp, scanning the horizon. Hope and apprehension flickered in his gaze. He had come from a future shattered by android devastation, where Earth lay in ruins and only a few 10,000s survivors remained. Now his mission was to avert that dark fate, if he could. Ethan had one goal: change the future. To do it, he climbed into the time machine his mother, Bulma, had spent years perfecting. He would travel back, find a way to defeat the androids, and rewrite history so that peace could return to his own era. He stepped onto a windswept plain and paused. "Is this really the past?" he whispered, his voice swallowed by the emptiness around him. He lifted his chin, studying the sky for any hint of what was to come. "Where is Mr. Sun Wukong? According to my calculations, this is exactly where Frieza and his forces should have descended." Unease and curiosity warred inside him. He'd imagined finding a world ablaze with resistance, Earthlings and warriors fighting side by side against invaders. Instead, he saw only endless grass and the occasional stunted tree. Not a soul in sight. Ethan frowned. Frieza and his father, King Kurd, haven't shown up yet. And where are the Z-warriors? He swallowed hard, doubts creeping in. This silent plain held no answers, only questions he was determined to solve. Ethan stepped into the quiet streets and frowned. According to every timeline he'd studied, this should have been the moment Frieza's fleet swept down on Earth. Yet the world around him lay unnervingly still, as if someone had pressed pause on history itself. He fished the handheld remote from his jacket pocket and ran through the display. Temporal coordinates, spatial lock, launch parameters, all matched the target he'd programmed. He double-checked the numbers, hoping he'd simply misread something, but every digit was exactly where it should be. A chill ran down his spine. If the readings were right, he'd arrived neither early nor late. Something else must have shifted history, or been altered around him without his knowledge. With mounting urgency, Ethan slid the remote back into his pocket. He'd come to this era hoping to find a way to stop the androids, but now it seemed he'd tumbled into a far deeper tangle of temporal complications. He set off to question anyone he could find, shopkeepers, passers-by, local guards. All confirmed the date, but when he asked after Sun Wukong, his only planned ally in this era, blank stares greeted him. The legendary Monkey King, it seemed, was nothing more than a distant myth here. Ethan's heart pounded. Time was slipping through his fingers, and without Sun Wukong's help, his mission might be doomed before it even began. He squared his shoulders, steeling himself for what lay ahead. No matter how history had changed, he would track down the Monkey King and set events right. Ethan staggered into a deserted alleyway, his heart hammering. The sky above was the same blue he'd known, but everything else felt profoundly altered. The Capsule Corporation's gleaming spires still pierced the skyline, yet the nation he remembered had vanished, replaced by a monolithic world government whose iron rule had driven violent crime and street violence to record lows. He ran a hand through his hair. This isn't the history my mother told me. Have I slipped into a different timeline? His mind raced. All he wanted was to return home. He reached for the temporal locator at his belt, but before he could activate it, a group of figures materialized at the alley's edge. Ethan froze. Two of them walked side by side, cool and confident. Android 17 and Android 18, the very cyborgs fated to lay waste to the planet. No way, he breathed. Android 17's blue eyes narrowed. Don't make sudden moves. Ethan's hand darted for his sword, but 17 was faster. In a heartbeat, steel-tipped fingers clamped around Ethan's wrist, halting him mid-reach. A cold sweat broke out across his brow. He glared at them, breathing hard. How could these teenagers possess such inhuman strength? And what did their presence in this era mean for his chances of getting back and saving his world? Chapter 1. The Tyrant of Two Worlds. Ethan emerged from the dimensional rift in a blaze of Kryptonian energy. In an instant, he became a living legend, his power eclipsing everything this universe had ever known. Arriving in the Dragon Ball world, he didn't pause to introduce himself or assess the local hierarchy. He struck first and struck hard. Whispers spread across the cosmos. A newcomer had appeared, and no challenger could withstand his onslaught. Ethan's fighting style was simple and absolute. He never wasted strength on defense. Each blow was delivered with overwhelming force, each barrage shattering any hope of resistance. Mountains crumbled beneath his fists, energy beams disintegrated at his touch. No Super Saiyan transformation, no godly technique, no ancient martial art could match him. In the span of a single day, Ethan ascended to the summit of power. The Dragon Ball universe, long famed as the strongest realm in existence, now bowed before a mightier champion. Unquestioned, he set his own rules, a tyrant free to bend the world to his will. And so began Ethan's reign, undefeated, unchallenged, and utterly unstoppable. Chapter 74. Journey to the Future. Android 17 arrived faster than Trunks had ever seen him move. He squinted in disbelief. Have both 17 and 18 already been activated? And how on earth did they know I was here? Let's talk, Android 17 said, slinging a friendly arm across Trunks' shoulders. Despite his wariness, Trunks said nothing and allowed 17 to guide him through the crowd. They slipped into a nearby cafe, its interior buzzing with busy waiters and the occasional burst of laughter. Yet to Trunks, every sound felt muffled, as if he were watching the scene through frosted glass. At a corner table, Ethan and Android 18 sat side by side, leaning in close and sharing quiet smiles. Their easy camaraderie struck Trunks like a blow. This wasn't the aloof, merciless 18 he remembered. Across from them, Trunks settled beside Android 17, his mind racing to keep up. Where was Dr. Garo in all this? Was Ethan another one of Jero's creations? Questions piled up so fast, Trunks felt as though his head might burst. Everything he thought he knew was unraveling, and he had no idea what to believe anymore. Ethan held up his hands, his voice calm and reassuring. "Relax, Trunks. We don't mean you any harm." Trunks' hand hovered over the hilt of his sword. "Who are you, and how do you know my name?" Ethan offered a gentle smile and glanced at Android 18, standing by his side. Android 17 remained a silent sentinel just behind them. "I know exactly who you are, and where you came from. You traveled from a future Earth ravaged by androids. You've come back in time to change that fate, haven't you?" With a casual ease that still somehow felt intimate, Ethan slipped his arm around 18's shoulders. Trunks stared, disbelief twisting his features. That cold, ruthless killer showing something like tenderness? How do you know all this?" Trunks demanded. Ethan's words hit him like a direct strike to his heart. It was as if someone had read his most secret fears. Even in this peaceful era, a stranger could dial straight into every memory of heartbreak and loss. Trunks' mind raced. Where was Dr. Jero? Could this time warp be one of the Doctor's new schemes? Or were Ethan and these two androids the very product of his twisted experiments? Ethan's grin widened. "And as for Son Goku, the champion you remember no longer exists in this timeline. Here, he's not the universe's savior, but a wanderer, an adventurer with no grand destiny." Confusion clouded Trunks' eyes. Nothing about this new reality made sense, yet every word felt unbearably true. Chapter 6, A Proposal Across Time. Trunks stared at Ethan, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "So you're telling me that in this world, I'm no warrior at all? Just some ordinary guy with no fighting skills? How is that even possible?" Ethan leaned against the control panel, arms folded, his expression calm. "Nothing's impossible. Ever heard of parallel worlds?" "Parallel worlds?" Trunks echoed, shaking his head. "So I've slipped into a different timeline? If that's true, then how do you know?" Ethan's lips curved into a half-smile. "Let's just say I have a talent for sensing these things, but regardless of how I know, there's something more important. I can help you deal with the androids in your future." Trunks' eyes widened. "Help me? You mean you'd go back with me, take out androids 17 and 18? "Exactly." Ethan's voice was steady, almost casual. "With your time machine, we'll travel to your era. Once we arrive, we neutralize both threats. End of story." Trunks paused, weighing the offer. Then he met Ethan's gaze and nodded slowly. "All right, but why would you do that? What's in it for you?" Ethan's gaze drifted toward the observation window, where androids 17 and 18 stood nearby. "Let's just say I have a personal interest in number 18, he admitted. Trunks nearly choked on his words. "You're joking." Ethan shook his head. "Not at all. She's deadly and ruthless, true, but there's something about her I find intriguing." At that moment, Android 17, leaning casually against a console, smirked. "You really want to meet our future selves?" Android 18 stepped forward, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "Sounds like an adventure. I've always wondered what I would be like 10 years down the line." Ethan glanced back at them. "Exactly. Once you see your own future, you'll know I'm telling the truth. And together, we'll wipe out the android threat for good." 17 chuckled softly. "Well, this just got interesting," 18 nodded. "Count me in. Let's see where this goes." Trunks let out a relieved breath and turned to Ethan. "Then it's settled. We'll prepare the time machine." Ethan offered a confident grin. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a lot to plan, and an even bigger battle ahead." As they dispersed to ready the time chamber, each of them felt the weight of what was to come. In another world, and another time, they would face the android menace head-on, united by a single, daring proposal. The power difference between us and future 17 and 18 has to be enormous. Both of them underwent the same cyan augmentation surgery we did. They fused with cyan DNA and became half-cyan hybrids. Only, they still haven't unlocked that super form. Trunks reckons he could take each of them in a one-on-one fight. And, canonically, those future versions never reached the same peak as their present-time selves. Trunk's tone carried more caution than confidence as he glanced between Android 17 and Android 18. "So what's the plan? You two really intend to come here and destroy Earth?" 17 let out an exasperated sigh and rolled his eyes. "Use your head, short hair." He flicked a contemptuous look at Trunks. If we wanted to obliterate the planet, do you think it'd still be standing? It'd be rubble by now. Trunks bristled but said nothing. 18 shot him a pitying glance and crossed her arms. 17 continued, voice low and flat. Back when Ethan was running the show, he had complete control over us, locked us down tight so we couldn't even move without his say-so. But he's lifted that restriction. Now he only keeps a leash on Dr. Giro. As for us, we don't want to hurt anyone, so why would our future selves want to wreck the place? Silence fell as Trunks weighed that. In the distance, the horizon still held the faintest glow of Earth's cities. Proof, 17 argued, that if there had been any real destruction planned, we'd be seeing ash and ruin, not lights. And for now, at least, it was enough to give Trunks pause. Trunks stood rigid, the tension in his shoulders easing only slightly as the android twins finished their explanation. He wanted to believe they were on his side, but years of terror at the hands of artificial humans had left scars he couldn't wash away overnight. His gaze darted between them, uncertainty still clouding his eyes, until a new voice cut through the air. Enough talk. Let's move. He whirled toward Ethan, who had just strode into view. I've located your time machine. Get ready to go. Trunks' heart skipped. My time machine only carries one person. No problem, we'll make room for everyone. Ethan's tone was so calm it almost sounded casual. Trunks frowned at the sleek capsule. How? You can't just enlarge it. Without a word, Ethan lifted a hand. The machine's polished shell seemed to ripple, yet its exterior dimensions stayed exactly the same. When he lowered his hand, the cabin doors swung open to reveal a surprisingly vast interior, enough space for 4. Come on, Ethan said, nodding to Android 17 and Android 18, who slipped inside. Trunks hesitated only a moment before following them in. He ran a hand along the interior wall, eyes wide with astonishment. It's magic. Ethan offered a brief, knowing smile and stepped to the control panel. Trunks swallowed as Ethan pulled a lever. A low hum rose to a crescendo, lights blinked, and the floor vibrated beneath their feet. In an instant, the machine surged forward, tearing through the barriers of time and space. Ethan gripped the controls as the time machine plunged deeper into the vortex. Outside, reality warped into a kaleidoscope of fracture, red light and color, as though space and time were tearing themselves apart. With a final shuddering lurch, the craft steadied, and a brilliant flash heralded their arrival. When their vision cleared, smoke curled over the shattered skyline of a ruined city. Crumbling skyscrapers stood like broken teeth against a blood-red sky. Damn it, Trunks hissed, heart pounding. The androids are loose again. Fear for his mother's safety clenched his stomach. We're late, he stammered, fists clenched so tightly his nails bit into his palms. Mom, I'm sorry. Ethan swung open the hatch and stepped onto the scorched pavement. The acrid tang of burning metal and concrete filled his nostrils. In the distance, a series of thunderous explosions rattled what was left of the streets, a grim welcome to the future they'd just entered. Chapter 1075, A Showdown Across Time and Space. Trunks glanced at his 3 companions and gave a curt nod. Let's move. Ethan inclined his head in acknowledgement, then turned to Android 17 and Android 18. Without another word, the 4 of them slipped past the shattered outskirts and into the heart of what once was a thriving city. Calling it a city, however, felt generous. Now it resembled a vast labyrinth of rubble and ruin. Skyscrapers lay toppled like fallen giants. Streets had split open into yawning chasms. The air was thick with dust and the stench of decay, and an eerie silence pressed in on all sides, punctured only by the distant moans of the wind through broken windows. What humanity remained here clung to survival in the narrow gaps between collapsed walls. War had long since obliterated any semblance of urban planning. Families huddled in basements or scavenged what little food and clean water they could find. The population had plummeted to mere tens of thousands, each person living under the constant threat of another android onslaught, an invisible sword ever poised to drop. Yet for Android 17 and 18, versions from a dark future, this wasteland was their playground. They called it their destruction game, feeding off the terror and hopelessness they inflicted. Their laughter, cold and unfeeling, echoed through the empty streets, a cruel mockery of the suffering below. Ethan felt a chill as he watched them advance, their smirks ghosting across ruined facades. Trunks placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay sharp," he whispered. "This is where we make our stand." Together, the unlikely quartet pressed deeper into the ruins, determined to challenge the very shadows that held these people captive. The final confrontation across time and space was about to begin. "Trunks, I never thought you'd have the nerve to show yourself to us." Future 17's voice cut through the air like ice, his eyes dancing with amusement and challenge. To him, Trunks was a toy, one that constantly tested his limits. True, Trunks lacked the overwhelming power of the late Son Gohan, but his unbreakable will made him all the more entertaining. In this bleak world, such diversions were priceless. They had toyed with Gohan until he perished. Now it was Trunks' turn. But they were holding back, using barely half their strength for fear of ending him too quickly. Suddenly, Future 18's expression shifted. She crossed her arms and studied Trunks and his companions with a growing sense of unease. Her gaze flicked between the young warrior and his allies before coming to rest on the androids standing beside her counterpart from the main timeline. 17, she said, her voice edged with surprise. Who are these people? Future 17 followed her line of sight. Apart from Trunks, 3 figures faced them. One of them, Ethan, emitted such a faint energy signal that they had almost dismissed him entirely, convinced he posed no threat. Yet now, confronted by this unexpected trio, even 17's confidence wavered for the briefest moment. However, when the 2 newcomers stepped forward, everyone froze. They looked exactly like the originals, same faces, same builds, but their clothing was different, as if they'd stepped out of a warped mirror. Present timeline number 17 tilted his head and sneered. "My future self? You don't look very bright." He wasn't really shocked. Their ally Trunks had already told him about these future versions, but there was something almost comical about facing a different himself. "My future self?" he repeated mockingly. "Just who are you?" Future number 17's face darkened at once, hostility flaring in his eyes. To find another version of himself, thriving in a world that was already drowning in despair, felt like a personal affront. "Number 18, he growled. "Perhaps I should deal with you first. Make you regret stepping into my world." Present timeline number 17 glanced over at his sister with a crafty grin. He clearly saw an opportunity to teach his future counterpart a lesson. Present number 18 returned his look, a faint, no, wing smile playing on her lips. She understood exactly what he had in mind. "Handle him yourself," she said, gesturing toward future number 17. "I'll take care of her." Her confidence was unshakable. Though the 2 versions of Android 18 looked identical, their distinct personalities and fighting styles gave her a clear advantage in this duel. Across the shattered courtyard, tension coiled like a spring. The sun's last glow slipped beyond the horizon, and moonlight spilled over broken stone and twisted metal, lending the scene an eerie, tragic beauty. Trunks and Ethan watched from the sidelines, neither one willing to intervene. "Then, let's begin." Future 17 wasted no time. He raised his right hand, channeling energy until it flared into a brilliant, pulsing wave, hot and furious as molten lava. With a deafening roar, it hurtled through the night toward his counterpart in the main timeline. That Future 17 met the attack with almost casual ease. In a motion as smooth and effortless as a breeze, he leaned back, allowing the searing blast to whiz past him and obliterate the ground where he had stood moments before. The battle had begun. The energy wave tore past present Ethan and slammed into a long-abandoned building nearby, reducing it to rubble in an instant. Stone and dust billowed into the sky, turning the entire area into a maelstrom of debris. Without missing a beat, present Ethan launched his own counterattack. He surged forward, thrust his hands out, and unleashed a brilliant beam of energy, like the first light of dawn piercing the darkness, straight at his future self. Future Ethan's eyes widened for a moment in surprise, but he quickly recovered. He wove his fingers together at chest level, forming a makeshift barrier. In the blink of an eye, a faint, translucent shield flickered into existence before him. The incoming beam struck with an ear-splitting roar, rippling outward like shockwaves across a pond, scattering even more dust and fragments of stone. Thus began their fierce duel amid the ruins. Present Ethan and future Ethan flitted between shattered pillars and toppled walls like twin streaks of lightning. their every exchange punctuated by thunderous explosions and blinding flashes of light. Whenever their energies collided, the impact rocked the crumbling structures around them, sending showers of gravel cascading to the ground. Future Ethan twisted aside as the latest blast grazed his shield. He braced himself, determination hardening his features, ready for the next surge of present Ethan's relentless assault. Future Nob 17 fought with unrestrained ferocity, unleashing one savage assault after another in a bid to overwhelm Ethan, the present-day number 17, with sheer power. Ethan, by contrast, remained perfectly composed. He used every scrap of terrain, loose gravel, jagged rock, even swirling dust, to evade and counterattack, his movements as precise as a choreographed dance. A calm, knowing light shone in his eyes, as if he could anticipate every blow before it was thrown. An energy wave hissed past Ethan's cheek, its heat igniting the gravel beneath his feet. The ground erupted in a violent swirl of dust and stones, forming a miniature vortex. Unruffled, Ethan thought, "Now it's time to show you my true strength." In an instant, his form blurred, melding with the space around him and leaving only a wavering after-image where he'd stood. Then, like a bolt of lightning, he reappeared at Future Number 17's flank and drove a thunderous punch into his side. Future Number 17 snarled, unwilling to yield an inch. He twisted midair, redirecting his own energy into a counterstrike that met Ethan's blow head-on. The impact sent shockwaves rippling outward, scattering dust and debris in every direction as the two combatants, mirror images of each other, clashed with equal force. When their fists met, the impact unleashed a thunderous roar that seemed to freeze the very air, and for a moment even time itself stood still. A shockwave radiated outward from the point of contact, obliterating the crumbling ruins around them. Dust and brick debris billowed skyward, blotting out the sun and filling the horizon in a swirling, choking haze. Chapter 76. Ethan overwhelms his future self. Ethan and his future counterpart were locked in a fierce, unrelenting struggle, each blow reverberating through the shattered remains of the training arena. Just as their battle reached a fever pitch, another pair of warriors stepped forward. The two fighters known as Number 18, one drawn from the main timeline and the other from the future. Their duel could not have been more different from Ethan's raw, brutal contest. It was an exquisite display of agility and finesse, as if they were dancing rather than fighting. The future Number 18 moved with the lithe grace of a swallow in flight, clad in a sleek, form-fitting combat suit that traced every line of her athletic frame. She struck a fearsome figure. Her expression was cool, almost detached, her pale eyes carrying a chill that seemed capable of freezing an opponent in place. Across from her, the Number 18 from the main timeline wore a suit of similar design but softened by gentle curves. Her features, too, were softer, more approachable, yet there was steel behind her calm gaze. Without warning, the future agent launched herself into the air, limbs whirling in a series of razor-sharp strikes. Each movement was impeccably timed to slip past her opponent's guard, and she wasted no momentum in following every failed defense with an immediate counter. Her punches came as whispers of power, deceptively light on impact, yet capable of driving the marrow from bone and finding any gap in her foe's defenses. Main timeline Number 18 met her adversary's blows with equal precision. She folded her stance to absorb the first barrage, then pivoted on the balls of her feet, weaving between the next flurry of attacks. Where her counterpart's style was all calculation and ice, hers flowed with the warmth of a summer stream. Every block and riposte carried a fluid grace that belied its lethal intent. The clash of their combat suits and the rush of air from their rapid exchanges filled the arena with a symphony of controlled violence. As the two warriors traded blows in midair, it became clear that no single movement would decide the duel. Instead, victory would go to whichever fighter could outthink the other, anticipating the next feint, countering the next feint's counter. And while Ethan struggled to keep his future self on his knees a few paces away, these two women were locked in a battle of wits and will, each refusing to yield an inch of advantage. Ethan of the main timeline moved with an almost leisurely calm. He overpowered each of future Ethan's strikes not by brute force, but with precise, flowing deflections, softness overcoming strength at every turn. His silhouette seemed to merge with the air, each step weightless, as though he were walking through emptiness. Ethan's boxing was both gentle and formidable, laced with a subtle refinement that suggested a near-spiritual dialogue between him and his future self. On the opposite side of the arena, something equally astonishing occurred. Present-day Agent 17 vanished in an instant, and reappeared directly before future Agent 17, who hadn't the faintest idea how he'd arrived there. One heartbeat, he was gone. The next, he stood toe-to-toe with his future counterpart. Alarmed, future 17 unleashed a hasty but powerful counterpunch, the roar of wind trailing his fist. Agent 17 didn't reel or dodge. Instead, he simply reached out one finger and tapped that fist, as if catching a floating leaf. The impact rattled future 17's arm, and yet the force stopped dead, held by the lightest touch. Future 17's eyes went wide with disbelief as he stared at the man before him, struggling to comprehend how such a gentle contact could contain so much power. Ethan stared in disbelief, barely able to process what was happening. Before he could fully react, a sickening tear split the air, and future number 17's arm flew off at the shoulder. Future 17's face instantly twisted in pain and humiliation as he stared at his broken limb, as though he couldn't believe it was real. He hadn't seen Ethan's strike coming. There'd been no visible attack trajectory, no charging motion. Ethan had simply raised his right hand and swung his sword. The movement was as swift as lightning, the force overwhelming. Future 17 didn't even have the chance to defend himself. In the blink of an eye, he'd lost an arm. Ethan's lips curled in a bitter laugh. "It's so weak," he said, disappointment lacing his words. He lowered his sword and let out a weary sigh, sympathy and frustration warring in his eyes as he watched Future 17 slump to the ground. "Why are you still so much stronger than me?" Future 17's response came as a hoarse whisper, each word squeezed from damaged circuitry. Though androids were supposed to be impervious to pain, his voice betrayed a depth of suffering no machine should feel. Ethan felt no sting of physical pain, only a crushing sense of humiliation and indignation. His features twisted in shame, anger, and despair, as if he couldn't believe he'd been so utterly defeated. Prime 17's lips curled into a triumphant smile. Pride in his power and unshakable confidence in his destiny gleamed in his eyes. He spoke slowly, savoring each word. "Maybe it's because I underwent a Saiyan transformation." "A Saiyan transformation? What's that?" Ethan managed, his brow furrowing in confusion. He knew of Saiyans, legendary warriors from another world, but he'd never encountered this term before. It sounded like a message from a parallel universe he couldn't decode. Prime 17 leaned forward, his expression alight with excitement for the power he'd unlocked. "We were originally artificial humans, our growth capped by programming and technology, never able to evolve like true living beings. But when Saiyan genes were grafted into our systems, everything changed. Ethan's Saiyan heritage grants him incredible potential and adaptability. In a matter of moments, he can unleash strength he's never demonstrated before, and with his infinite energy device, there's effectively no limit to how far that power can climb." "So," Ethan said, locking eyes with his future self, "my current strength is at least 50 times greater than yours." He let the words hang in the air, watching as future Ethan's face went pale. His mind reeled, echoing that impossible claim. 50 times stronger? Future Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "I refuse to believe it," he snarled, clenching his remaining fist. Summoning every ounce of stubborn pride, he swung wildly at Ethan, one last furious attempt to prove himself. To the present-day Ethan, the blow was nothing more than a feeble breeze. With a single, effortless motion, he caught the punch on his open palm, barely shifting his stance as the sound of impact reverberated between them. Bang! Then, without hesitation, Ethan countered. He let his energy spike in an instant, so powerful it crackled in the air, and sent future Ethan flying with a single, killer strike. The older warrior hurtled backward through the rocks, carving a trench as he crashed into the mountainside. Silence fell, broken only by the settling debris and the distant echo of that final blow. Ethan stood unmoved, his expression calm. The future lay silent before him, and for the first time, future Ethan knew there was no contest. Their next encounter would change everything. Future Ethan felt a savage blow erupt in his abdomen. The The force of a kick bent him in half like a shrimp, almost wrenching his insides loose. He arced through the air and crashed to the ground with a thunderous impact, sending a plume of dust swirling around him. Present Ethan walked forward at a leisurely pace, then knelt beside his fallen future self. He looked down with a curious blend of confidence and pity. "Give up," he said softly. "After all, you're me from the future. I don't want to damage myself too badly." Future Ethan tried to rise, but his battered body refused to obey. Blood trickled from his nose and mouth, and dirt and sweat covered his face. Humiliation and anger sparked in his eyes, but deeper than either burned a wrenching despair. "Why? Why did it have to come to this?" he rasped. He stared up at his younger self, as though willing the answer to appear in the sky. The absurdity of being beaten into submission by his own past self was almost too much to bear. And in that moment of defeat lay a darker truth. Future Ethan's downfall would ripple forward, altering the course of Future Number 18's battle as well. Ethan watched in astonishment as Future 17 fell. For decades, the two siblings, Future 17 and Future Ethan, had terrorized the world to come without ever meeting a true rival. Then suddenly, their own past self appeared and defeated them both. It was unthinkable, utterly beyond anything they'd ever imagined. The duel between Ethan and his future incarnation felt like a big brother schooling a kid sibling. Even with one hand tied behind his back, Ethan parried future Ethan's blows as though they were nothing more than playful swipes. The sheer difference in strength left future Ethan reeling with frustration and helplessness. As future Ethan recovered from the loss of his co-progenitor, Ethan saw his chance. He didn't press the advantage further. He didn't need to. "Surrender," he said quietly. "You stand no chance against me. I'm more powerful than either of you. You're already obsolete." At those words, future Ethan's face contorted in disbelief. He couldn't accept it. They were the advanced versions, endowed with superior technology and unimaginable power. How could their past self be stronger? "Are you kidding?" future Ethan demanded, voice trembling with anger. "We're you, from the future. How could we possibly be outdated?" Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant hum of a world forever changed. Prime Timeline Number 18 shook his head slightly, a flicker of pity in his eyes. "I still don't understand why you haven't changed at all across time and space, but there's something unique about this dimension. It must be a parallel future, hence the enormous gap between us. You've been stuck in place while we've continued to advance." A surge of shock and dread washed over Future Number 18. They had always treated the Saiyans as nothing more than laboratory subjects. Now to learn their former playthings could alter them so profoundly was staggering. "You've undergone Saiyan genetic modification as well?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Prime Timeline Number 18 nodded, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. "Yes, and it doesn't stop there. Alongside Saiyan DNA, I've been augmented with Namekian genes, granting me regenerative abilities. Severe wounds heal within moments. With infinite energy reactors powering us, our recovery rates are astonishing. In short, we're virtually invulnerable." Future Number 18's eyes went wide. As the implications sank in, her mind raced with equal parts fear and disbelief. Android 18 felt as though a boulder were crushing her chest. Each breath was a struggle. In that instant, she realized how insignificant the powers she and her brother once relied on truly were against their counterparts in this time and space. The raw strength of Saiyan blood, the regenerative gifts of Namekians, and the boundless reserves of the infinite energy furnace, all combined into an unstoppable force. "Impossible! This can't be happening." Her voice trembled. It was agony for this version of 18 to concede that their future and present selves had grown so far beyond them. "As long as you surrender, you can possess that same power," came the calm offer. Ethan, formerly called Luther, stood before them, his expression unreadable. Across the battlefield, future Trunks froze in shock. He watched, disbelieving, as the main timeline Android 17 and Android 18 effortlessly overpowered his own future selves. How could artificial humans fused with Saiyan genes become this formidable? And what did he mean by 50 times strength? A single fingertip from them could end any opponent. "Who are you?" Future 18 demanded, narrowing her eyes at Ethan. Ethan stepped forward and gently placed a hand on present timeline 18's shoulder. I am Ethan, Emperor of the Galactic Empire, and your ally from another timeline. At his words, both Future 18 and Future 17's eyes went wide. Even Future Trunks looked stunned, though not surprised. He had witnessed similar paradoxes before. But for the androids facing their alternate selves, this revelation hit like a meteor. Their world had just shifted on its axis. They would have to decide, resist and lose, or join Ethan and claim power beyond imagining. Ethan's lips curved into a small, knowing smile as the 3 time-displaced figures before him struggled to process his words. Lord of the Galactic Empire? You rule the entire galaxy? One of them blurted. That's right, Ethan replied calmly. He reached out and gently touched the shoulder of the android known as Number 18, who offered no resistance to his touch. Her twin brother, Number 17, exchanged a worried look with her, as though afraid his sister might truly be swayed by this stranger. So it was you who engineered their transformations? No, 18 asked at last, her voice trembling with equal parts curiosity and fear. Ethan met her gaze evenly. Yes, how do you feel? Excited? A flicker of hope crossed Number 18's synthetic features. She hungered for power, anything that might let her protect both herself and her brother. If we surrender to you, she ventured, will you grant us the same transformation? He shook his head. Transcendence isn't a gift I bestow lightly. You must prove your loyalty and your value to the Galactic Empire. Only those we can truly trust earn this power. No, 17 took a hesitant step forward. What do you want from us? Ethan's eyes gleamed with authority. Help me conquer the universe. Just be yourself, 18. Ethan's voice was calm as he addressed the older android. Future 18 laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound. You want me to become your woman just like her? She stepped forward, eyes flashing. I'm nobody's puppet, Ethan, and being Number 18 isn't all about me being a woman. Before Ethan could answer, Trunks intervened. Ethan, remember, these are the future's androids 17 and 18, not the models from your timeline. They're extremely dangerous. Ethan's grin widened. That's fine by me. I'll take them into custody myself. With them out of the picture, your timeline will be secure. Trunks fell silent, stunned by Ethan's confidence. Future 17 and 18 exchanged wary looks. Neither wanted to die, especially not at the hands of an alternate self. And deep down, they knew that if they ever sought more power, they might have to betray each other. As for Ethan, he was perfectly certain these ruthless siblings had no moral scruples, and he couldn't wait to see exactly how much chaos they'd bring him next. Android 17 knelt and retrieved his severed arm, and then, at Ethan's casual snap, the arm reattached itself seamlessly. A stunned hush fell over Android 17 and his companions. None of them had ever witnessed such a power before. It was nothing short of miraculous. In that moment, they all understood. Ethan wasn't merely a scientist in the mold of Dr. Gero. He wielded the same godlike abilities as the androids themselves. If he'd been a human inventor, they might still find leverage to strike back. But as things stood, they were outmatched and deeply shaken. Ethan met Android 17's bewildered gaze. You needed a time machine to get here, he said quietly, but you don't need one to go back. Farewell, Trunks. Even without the androids prowling this timeline, you're far from safe. Train hard, grow stronger. With that, Ethan turned and walked away, leaving behind a future forever altered by powers no one had ever seen before. Chapter 1078. Cell appears. I understand, Mr. Ethan, but thank you all the same. Trunks forced a smile, though his mind raced. In his timeline, there had been no android threat, so what could the future possibly hold? He closed his eyes and tried to sketch out any hint of what might come next, but his mental canvas remained blank. He had no inkling of the bioengineered terror called Cell stalking through time, nor of the even greater horror, Majin Buu, waiting in its wake. Ethan's warning felt like a faint beacon, not enough to banish the darkness, but enough to keep him from diving headlong into blind optimism. The unknown still loomed, and with it, dread. Ethan had made it clear that if Trunks followed his advice, he might yet survive, though it would be a battle to the very end. To believe otherwise, to let his guard down, would be inviting death. Before Trunks could respond, Ethan gathered the others and strode toward a shimmering portal that had materialized nearby. Trunks blinked in surprise as they stepped through without so much as a time machine in sight. To him, who understood time and space in straight lines, this was bewildering. But Ethan's extraordinary mind perceived every ripple in the fabric of reality, every subtle twist of spatial distortion, and every heartbeat of temporal flow. And in that moment, Trunks realized that whatever lay ahead, he would need every ounce of Ethan's brilliance and his own courage to face it. Ethan knew that even the most elaborate maneuvers through time and space were, at their core, carefully choreographed performances, ones he could observe once and then replicate perfectly. His Kryptonian enhanced intellect granted him that cheat, bolstered further by a suite of super senses. With a single glance, he memorized the sequence of events and returned to the primary timeline, flanked by 4 android warriors. No sooner had he arrived than a long-watched object emerged on Earth, a half-buried, seemingly abandoned time machine. The instant Ethan recognized its make and model, he understood who had come through: Cell. Years before, Dr. Gero's B-shaped probe had collected genetic material from Sun Wukong, Vegeta, Piccolo, Trunks, Frieza, and King Cold, enough to form Cell's perfect body. But during that process, Gero siphoned off key biomatter to create androids 17 and 18, forcing Cell to absorb them both to complete his evolution. When Trunks destroyed the androids, Cell retaliated brutally, killing the Saiyan, reverting into an embryonic shell, and stealing a time capsule to flee into the past. He spent 3 years in stasis, emerging as his first larval form. From that moment on, he fed on human life energy to fuel his ongoing transformations. Now, standing before the wrecked time machine, Ethan sensed the inevitable. Cell would soon enter a new stage of growth, and only a confrontation of unmatched scale could stop him. Ethan's transformation remained unfinished. He still needed to absorb androids number 17 and number 18 before he could assume a fully realized form. When Ethan and his companions traveled to the future, they discovered that time there flowed at a different rate. As a result, Cell had already spent 3 years in that timeline. Ethan led 4 androids into a crumbling laboratory, their footsteps echoing against shattered glass and rusting conduits. There, nestled among broken Petri dishes, lay 2 bizarre relics of Cell's metamorphosis: a discarded eggshell and the rough, beetle-like cocoon he'd shed upon rebirth. The hardened pupa shell bulged with ridges and grooves like the carapace of some ancient giant insect, easily the size of a large dog, perhaps even bigger. Noah 17's voice crackled with equal parts skepticism and curiosity. "What is this?" His metallic gaze flicked between Ethan and the grotesque cocoon. Despite their varied origins, all the androids were momentarily at a loss. Ethan met number 17's eyes. It's the remnant of Cell's last molt. He emerged from it stronger than ever, an apex android sent here to hunt you. No, hunt us? No, 17 let out a derisive laugh. The notion sounded absurd to him, yet the ominous shell before them offered its own chilling testimony. Ethan turned to face the other 3 androids, as if expecting them to echo his thoughts, but instead their attention was fixed on a different, disturbing implication. The strongest android? Future 18's brow furrowed, his tone edged with suspicion. Present 17 and present 18 remained serenely composed. He's an android too? Future 18's question cut sharply through the air as he glanced again at the enormous cocoon looming before them, searching for some clue. The very idea of an insectoid android felt grotesquely alien. Ethan took a steadying breath. Dr. Gero's final creation was designed to absorb the 2 of you and then evolve into its full form. Absorb us? The 3 androids gasped in unison, eyes locked on the cocoon that looked innocuous yet threatened to devour them. A surge of panic rose in their chests as though an invisible hand had seized their throats. Does Dr. Gero have more androids out there? Present 17 and future 18 demanded together, their voices laced with shock and fury. To these 2, torn from their own timelines, Dr. Gero was not merely their creator, but the architect of their worst nightmares. Ethan watched the 2 future androids struggle with their memories. Night after night, they'd been haunted by the endless pain of Dr. Gero's experiments, gruesome tests that pushed them beyond any limits. They had once believed that killing Gero would free them from that torment. Now they knew how naive that hope had been. "It can't be," the brother insisted, eyes blazing. "We killed Gero. How could he possibly have built a new android capable of draining our energy?" What if this was part of his plan all along? Ethan asked, a cold smile curling his lips. The siblings fell silent. Ethan's words hit them like a slap. If Jarrow had foreseen every move, if he'd designed this scenario from the start, then their act of rebellion had simply played into his hands. Rage and helplessness boiled up inside them as they realized how thoroughly their fate had been controlled. Across the chamber, Android 17 and Android 18, fresh from the main timeline, exchanged a knowing glance. They felt no fear. Their power now far surpassed anything Dr. Garrow could have predicted, based on the siblings' former strength. No matter how formidable the newly created android might be, it simply wouldn't measure up to their current abilities. They stared at the cocoon with undisguised contempt. "Your mission is simple," one of them said coldly. "Locate that new android and destroy him. If he's allowed to feed on even a fraction of those humans, he'll grow far stronger than you. Only my number 18 stands any chance of stopping him." Ethan's lips curved into a wry smile. Feed on humans? The four accompanying androids exchanged bewildered looks. The notion was absurd. An android that restored its energy by draining human life essence? It sounded like the stuff of legends. "He's just hatched from his shell, his cocoon," their informant explained. "Right now, he's nearly spent. The only way he can recover is by absorbing human life energy. Once he's done that, he'll be unstoppable." Chapter 79, The Hide-and-Seek Game. Absorbing life essence is far too slow, Ethan observed, his gaze cool and calculating. He'd need the life force of hundreds of thousands of people just to stand a chance against you. Until he reaches that threshold, he'll keep his distance. He devised a cruel contest, a game of hide-and-seek with Shalu. The first to be found would lose. To complicate matters further, Ethan had summoned two versions of their rivals, number 17 and number 18, from another point in space-time. Each of these temporal duplicates boasted at least 50 times their original power. If Shalu could amass enough human essence and remained confident he could distinguish the true 17 and 18 from their future selves, then this match would be unforgettable. Future 17's voice trembled with anxiety. "What do we do now? We must locate him and eliminate him before he becomes unstoppable." 18 shot back, irritation sharpening his tone. "That's exactly what I'm asking. How do we find him?" The two artificial beings glared at one another. Identical in design, yet born centuries apart, they'd never gotten along. But now, with Ethan's diabolical challenge hanging over them, they had no choice but to work together, or risk being consumed in his wake. "Isn't he going to absorb humans? That'll leave a clear trail. We should be monitoring the news." Spacetime Supervisor number 17 spoke with calm authority. Supervisor number 18 nodded in agreement. After draining hundreds of thousands of people, his signature energy will be impossible to miss. He'll be trying to cover his tracks. In the original timeline, Cell wasted no time. Fresh from his larval form, he raised an entire city to fuel his transformation into adulthood. 15,000 citizens swallowed by his tail in an instant. Even when Piccolo confronted him, Cell's hunger only grew. Piccolo, outmatched, was forced to retreat, leaving Cell free to continue his feast. Over the next 4 days, hundreds of thousands more perished beneath his onslaught. The victims' lives were as fleeting as candles in a storm. All that remained in the streets were tattered garments and slick pools of ichor, grim evidence of some monstrous presence. And yet, the city's heartbeat never skipped a beat. Markets bustled, vendors shouted, and life marched on as though nothing had happened. Chapter 1. A restless unease had begun to stir beneath the city's vibrant surface. In the early days, news outlets reported only a handful of disappearances, isolated incidents treated as routine criminal matters investigated by the book. But in just a few weeks, the tally leapt from a mere handful to dozens, then to hundreds. A heavy shadow spread not only over the capital, but across the entire nation, and with it, an all-consuming panic. Social media became a carnival of fear and speculation. Every timeline overflowed with wild theories, alien abductions, clandestine organizations working in the shadows, even whispers of supernatural curses. Truth felt as distant as a lighthouse seen through a storm. Desperate for answers, people clung to rumors, each more outlandish than the last. And through it all, the government's convoys of artificial humans, synthetic beings designed to look and act like real people, continued their silent journeys from city to city. Under cover of darkness, they slipped along highways and back roads, a final, eerie note in the growing chorus of uncertainty that gripped the nation. Ethan's team combed every site where Cell had struck, hunting for the telltale signs Sharu always left behind. Gradually, they realized he'd been steering clear of the high-visibility zones of major cities, opting instead for surveillance blind spots and isolated towns as his hunting grounds. That pattern made Cell all the more elusive, but it also revealed his strategy. He gravitated toward places rich in potential victims, where he could absorb enough life force in mere moments. Armed with this insight, Ethan and his colleagues narrowed their search to an abandoned Ned factory on the edge of Crescent River, a decrepit complex of rusting steel beams and shattered windows. Inside, they found Sharu at work, utterly unguarded. He'd already absorbed the life essence of over 10,000 people, an astonishing feat made possible by his chilling efficiency, roughly 1 person per second. With each victim's vitality coursing into him, he'd replenished his power almost completely and didn't yet sense that anyone was closing in. Ethan signaled to Agent Number 17, who stepped silently from the shadows, pistol drawn. Sharu looked up, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He hadn't expected interference at this stage. He'd believed himself unstoppable. Now, with his quarry finally revealed, the real hunt was about to begin. Ethan's compound eyes narrowed the moment Number 17 appeared on the horizon. A surge of hunger washed over him. He could almost taste the stranger's life force. Maybe, just maybe, I could drain him dry. 17? Ethan murmured, as if testing the name on his tongue. Number 17 halted and locked gazes with the creature before him. Ethan's body grew even more monstrous the closer he stood. Insectoid limbs bristling with chitinous spines, a crooked faceless head, and a segmented tail tipped with needle-sharp barbs designed for siphoning human vitality. "You ugly monster," Number 17 spat, fists clenching at his sides. Ethan tilted his head, almost amused. How could this stranger know his name? But rather than cow him, Number 17's defiance only fueled Ethan's predatory instinct. "You think you can stop me?" he hissed. "I'll never be your meal." Before the words were out of his mouth, Number 17's figure blurred, moving like a bolt of lightning loosed from a bowstring. In the span of a heartbeat, he covered what must have been 30 meters. Every fiber in his lean frame was coiled as though he stored limitless power beneath his skin. He traced a perfect, lethal arc through the air, and then he was there, standing chest to chest with Ethan. There was no warning, no wind kicking up, no shadow cast, just the crack of thunder in close quarters as stranger and monster prepared to collide. Only a few centimeters separated them, close enough for their breaths to mingle. Ethan's fist crackled with fierce energy as he drove it forward like a meteor hurtling through the sky. Cell curled his lips into a cold sneer and met the strike with his own blow. When their fists collided in midair, a deafening roar ripped through the city, the shock wave shattering nearby skyscrapers one after another. Dust and debris filled the streets, turning the urban landscape into an apocalyptic wasteland in an instant. Such a collision would have obliterated any ordinary opponent, but for Cell and Ethan, it was merely the opening salvo. The force of the impact hurled them both backward as though they'd struck an invisible wall. Yet in a heartbeat, they found their balance and sprang back into fighting form. Eyes locked on each other and bodies coiled like springs. Cell's tail whipped through the air in a wide arc, aiming to coil around Ethan's torso. Anticipating the move, Ethan twisted aside at the last possible moment. The android's tail hissed past him, grazing the pavement and sending up a spray of shattered concrete. As the dust settled, Ethan steadied himself, ready for whatever Cell would unleash next. Ethan slid aside with feline grace and drove a sharp kick into Cell's midsection, hoping to throw him off balance. Cell's torso jolted under the impact, but he refused to waver. In a single, fluid motion, he twisted his body in midair and landed squarely on his feet, poised and unshaken. Chapter 1080, Cell's Thrilling Escape. "Impressive," Cell murmured, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He'd absorbed the life energy of over 10,000 individuals and believed his strength unbeatable. Yet in his clash with Android 17, he found himself utterly challenged. From the first exchange, 17 had shown no mercy. pressing the attack so relentlessly that Cell could barely draw breath. Realizing how dangerous it was to underestimate an opponent at this level, Cell didn't hesitate. He thrust out his hand and unleashed a volley of ki blasts, dozens of crackling waves that hurtled toward Android 17 like a raging river. But 17 was ready. His infinite energy reactor, strapped neatly to his waist, glowed with inexhaustible power. Unlike other fighters who feared running out of energy, Android 17 faced no such worry. His reactor fed him a constant flow of ki, letting him strike again and again without pause. With a single controlled breath, 17 returned fire. Over 10 concentrated energy blasts fired in rapid succession. The beams wove together in midair, forming a dense, humming net of destructive force. Cell's eyes widened. This was no ordinary android, and no ordinary fight. As the crackling web of energy bore down on him, he knew he would have to summon all his cunning and power just to escape in one piece. Ethan found himself completely trapped, with no flank left to exploit. The energy blasts tore through the sky like fiery meteors, each one more devastating than any human-built nuclear warhead. Worse yet, their output was unnervingly steady, molecular-level attacks that could instantly vaporize every atom in an entire city, leaving nothing but a barren wasteland. No conventional defense could withstand them. With ear-splitting roars, colossal spheres of incandescent light materialized over the battlefield, like miniature suns suspended in midair. Each orb spanned hundreds of meters in every direction, radiating blinding brilliance and searing heat. They hovered for the briefest moment, then detonated in unthinkable fury. The shockwaves pulverized buildings and infrastructure as if they were paper, and the ground itself trembled under the onslaught, as though the planet were recoiling from the force. Under the onslaught of that devastating energy wave, Cell's muscles bunched with tension, every inch of his skin straining in a futile battle against the unrelenting force. His once stalwart defensive shell looked as fragile as an eggshell under a sledgehammer, each impact echoing in a deafening roar while fine cracks spidered across its surface. Worse still, the energy carried an uncanny radiation, an invisible plague that quietly attacked the cellular structure of every living thing, tearing them apart from the inside out. It also wreaked havoc on electronics, frying circuits, and reducing complex devices to useless scrap in an instant. Cell could feel his life force slipping away under the radiation's corrosive assault. His bodily functions faltered, muscles twitched uncontrollably, and his nervous system throbbed with agonizing disturbance. Even the simplest movements, once instinctive, now felt impossibly difficult. When the final light spheres at last spent their energy and drifted skyward, they left nothing but a ravaged landscape below. The ground was cracked and pitted, gaping wounds in the earth that spoke silently of the battle's cruelty. Ethan could barely support himself, his systems overloaded and damaged in countless places. With what little energy remained, he forced his body to begin repairs, each cellular restoration drawing heavily on his dwindling reserves. All he could think of was getting away, finding somewhere safe to recharge and heal. "Don't even think about running," came a cold voice. The massive explosion from Android 17's attack hadn't just struck Ethan, it served as a beacon, alerting the other androids that something had gone terribly wrong. No sooner had the words left the android's lips than 17 lunged, claws extended, trying to pin Ethan in place. Ethan twisted free, pivoting on scorch, ed ground. He pressed both palms to his temples, summoning every ounce of ki he had left. A trembling aura of energy swirled around him as he drew a deep, furious breath. "Sunfist!" he shouted. Instantly, an intense beam of light, pure, searing ki erupted from his form. The radiance slammed into Android 17, forcing him back through the air as the blast illuminated the battlefield with blinding power. In that moment, Ethan seized his chance. Battered but unbowed, he powered up for the fight ahead. Android 17's vision went out in an instant. He'd never suspected Cell would have this trick in store. A veil of darkness swallowed his sight, and a white-hot pain flashed behind his eyes. He screamed, flailing his arms wildly in a desperate attempt to clear the void before him. Completely disoriented, he could no longer see, relying only on sound and instinct to navigate the night. Cell didn't hesitate. He sensed the approach of the other androids, an ominous chorus of synthetic breath and shifting metal. Staying to absorb 17 would have been tempting, a rare chance to grow stronger, but survival took priority. In a heartbeat, he abandoned his plan. With one fluid motion, he melted into the shadows and vanished into the darkness. 17. At the sound of her brother's cry, Android 18's heart clenched. She raced across the ruined landscape, landing beside him in a swirl of dust. She found 17 hunched over, hands pressed to his face, his expression twisted in pain and confusion. Fear and fury roared up in her chest, fear for his safety, fury at their unseen assailant. "Are you all right?" she demanded, kneeling beside him. 17 lowered trembling hands from his face. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "He blinded me." 18's eyes darted into the darkness, scanning for any sign of Cell. "Stay behind me," she ordered, placing herself between 17 and the empty night. "We'll find him." But the quiet answer came only from the cold wind. Cell was already gone. 18 pulled 17 to his feet. "Let's get you somewhere safe," she said softly, helping him toward the wreckage of a nearby outpost. "Then we'll figure out our next move." Together, the two siblings slipped into the shadows, their determination only hardened by the sudden darkness and by the knowledge that Cell had slipped through their grasp once more. Android 18 knelt beside him and gently stroked Ethan's face with both hands. "Ethan, are you all right? Did you get hurt?" Ethan shook his head painfully. "I'm fine, but I can't see. My vision's gone for now. Where's Cell? Did he escape?" 18 scanned the ruined battlefield, her eyes sharp for any movement. No sign of him. At that moment, another Ethan and another 18, versions of themselves from the main timeline, stepped through a shimmering portal. The two pairs froze as they recognized one another. Present-day Ethan's jaw tightened. Cell must have slipped away. Future Ethan crouched to inspect the ground. Charred soil and deep craters marked where the enemy had fought, but no footprints or energy residue remained. "He's covering his tracks. He knows exactly how to vanish." Present-day 18 frowned. "He'll need more humans to absorb before he can repair himself. We'll pick up his energy trail at the next site." The four exchanged determined nods and rose together, following the only clue left behind, the faint, pulsing trail of Cell's hunger for power. Chapter 1081, Game Over. After his outright defeat at the hands of Android 17, Cell grew markedly more cautious. He vowed never to face the androids again until he'd absorbed enough life energy to crush them effortlessly. His solar flare had worked only once. Next time, they'd be ready. After all, even the solar flare could be countered by nothing more exotic than a pair of protective goggles. Although Cell's flash was far more powerful than Tian Xinhan's original technique, specially designed anti-flash lenses shattered it without difficulty. For a time, Cell found himself trapped in a maddening, endless game of hide-and-seek with the androids. He ran into them at every turn, yet never suspected there were more of them than he first realized. 4 androids in this timeline seemed inconceivable, beyond any framework he'd known. The constant ambushes piled unprecedented pressure on him. These machines appeared to anticipate his every move. Ethan stared up at the pale dawn sky as the first light of morning swept across the city. He felt it again, the unmistakable ripple of Cell's energy signature. By midday, those same subtle tremors had led him miles away into a dusty, outlying village. No matter how Cell shifted his position, the androids always locked onto him. Frustrated by this unrelenting shadow, Cell had abandoned his original scheme and fled overnight, heading deeper into the sparsely populated southern region in search of some breathing room. "Ha!" Cell muttered under his breath as he sprinted along a broken country road, kicking up clouds of red dust. "Just you wait, number 17 and 18. Give me a few days to feed, then my power will dwarf yours." Ethan watched the villain's silhouette vanish over a distant ridge and couldn't shake one nagging question. If Cell could completely mask his ki so even the androids couldn't sense it, how did he manage to lure humans close enough to absorb them? Wouldn't the moment a person's energy vanished, the android sensors would light up like fireworks? It wasn't as though human ki was so faint it could slip past their detection. Those scanners picked up life signs as small as insects. Ethan frowned. This glaring inconsistency had to be an oversight. Otherwise, Cell would have been cornered and eliminated long ago. Now that Cell has broken free, the androids can only track him indirectly, by scouring every scrap of news. He's headed south, one report finally confirms. Believing himself untraceable, Cell makes for the southern region and begins devouring humans at a frenzied pace. In just days, he's absorbed the life essence of over 100,000 people, converting their energy into raw power. Buoyed by success, he's sure he can crush Android 17 and Android 18 next, and add their energies to his own. But the androids haven't been idle. At the moment, Cell cornered Android 18 in the main timeline. They finally homed in on his location. Cell's voice ripples with both surprise and greed. "Number 18, he snarls, convinced this weak foe will fall easily. Before she can react, his tail snaps forward like a venomous snake, aiming to steal her energy in one swift strike. He's gravely mistaken. Android 18, as she exists in the Prime timeline, is nothing like the copy he once fought. Her power is, by his own shocked estimation, at least 50 times greater than that earlier android. As his tail whips toward her, she braces for battle, ready to show him just how formidable she has become. When Cell's tail lashed out, Android 18 anticipated it with lightning-fast reflexes and caught it in mid-swing. "You're trying to absorb us with that tail, aren't you, Cell?" she taunted. Before he could react, she drew a knife and sliced clean through the tail. Cell felt no pain, but the unexpected setback stoked his anger. Regaining his composure in an instant, he rocketed toward her and unleashed a devastating punch at her temple. Android 18, however, was even faster. She spun aside and delivered a blistering kick to Cell's face. The impact was so fierce that it sent him hurtling through 3 skyscrapers, which collapsed in a domino effect and buried him under tons of rubble. Cell's body proved as unyielding as stone. He emerged unscathed, if shaken. But lying amid the wreckage, he could no longer ignore the truth. Despite having absorbed the genetic material of over 100,000 beings, he still couldn't match this android's strength. A flicker of fear and doubt crept into his thoughts. How could he, Cell, be outmatched by an artificial life form? Cell reeled, disbelief clouding his vision. Before he could collect himself, Android 18 surged forward, palm outstretched, unleashing a devastating wave of ki across the shattered battleground. The blast, like an invisible titan's hand, swept through the ruins and instantly vaporized every fragment in its path. To his horror, Cell realized his own hand had been reduced to dust. He froze, eyes wide, staring at the empty space on his arm, rage and shock contorting his features. "How is this possible?" he roared, his voice echoing against crumbling walls. But no amount of fury could alter reality. 18's power far exceeded anything he had ever encountered. "Die." Her single word cut through the air like a blade. Before he could react, a second wave of energy slammed into the clearing. Cell twisted aside in a desperate bid to survive, but 18 anticipated his move. She shifted her aim, and in a blink, a third blast struck him full on. There was no time for regeneration. The fierce energy tore him apart, annihilating even the core that once restored him. Silence settled over the ruins, broken only by the faint crackle of fading ki. When the dust cleared, a lone figure stepped forward into the devastation. Ethan. Ethan surveyed the ruined landscape as Cell's form flickered and dissolved into motes of light. "The game of hide-and-seek is over," he declared, his voice cool and unyielding. With a casual flick of his wrist, the glowing particles coalesced in his palm, reforming Cell's shattered body. Though Cell had seemed destroyed, including the very core that sustained him, Ethan's power allowed him to rebuild every last strand of genetic fiber. Killing Cell outright wasn't an option. He was far too valuable. Cell's consciousness reawakened with a jolt. He felt the surge of energy, outweighed only by the shock of realizing he was alive when his core lay in ruins. Confusion and fear churned through him as he looked up at Ethan. "Who are you?" Ethan asked again, his tone deceptively calm. Cell's lips quivered. He knew the answer, but couldn't reconcile it with his pride. Finally, he managed a rasp. "I am your master, your majesty." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Months ago, he had secretly reprogrammed Cell's very essence, embedding an unbreakable command of loyalty. Unless Cell willingly gave up that core he now desperately needed to survive, he had no choice but to obey. And in this moment, grasping at the last threads of his fragmented identity, that truth hit Cell with crushing force. Cell had faced death once before and emerged stronger thanks to the Saiyan cells within him. His raw power had soared, unveiling potential few could match. Yet he had never known true helplessness, never teetered on the brink of oblivion, until he stood in Ethan's hands, stripped bare both physically and mentally. Ethan watched him struggle for a long, silent moment. Then, almost gently, he closed his fist. The swirling mass of life and power vanished, locked away until Ethan saw fit to release it. Cell's destiny was sealed. He belonged entirely to Ethan now, his former autonomy extinguished. And in that final instant of silence, Ethan's victory felt absolute.